the hell are you doing, Lila? Nathaniel Grayson's voice sliced through the nursery's stillness, his eyes blazing as he towered over Lila Brooks, a black housemaid cradling his infant daughter, Sophie, against her chest. The billionaire's rage echoed off marble walls, condemning her for daring to nurture, not merely serve. Yet Sophie's cries hushed only in Lila's arms, a mystery that binds them in a storm of secrets. Why does this child cling to a stranger? What shadows lurk in the Grayson mansion, threatening to unravel a family's fragile bonds? Will Lila's courage expose a truth darker than the night? Dive into this tale of love, betrayal, and redemption. If Lila's quiet strength moves you, hit subscribe and share where and when you're watching. Your city, your time. What do you predict for this gripping saga? Stay until the end to uncover the truth. The Grayson mansion loomed over Long Island's windswept cliffs, its marble facade gleaming under a moonless sky, a palace of opulence cloaked in an eerie hush. Chandeliers cast golden fractals across polished floors, but the air within was heavy, as if the walls themselves held their breath. In the nursery where shadows danced on silk drapes, Lila Brooks sat cross-legged on a plush wool rug, her dark skin a stark contrast to the ivory opulence around her. Sophie Grayson, barely 6 months old, lay nestled against her chest, tiny fists curled into Lila's worn cotton blouse. The infant's breasts were soft, a fragile rhythm against the storm brewing beyond the door. Lila hummed a low, soulful melody, her mother's old lullaby, born in a Brooklyn tenement where hope was as scarce as heat. Her voice, warm and weathered, wrapped Sophie in a cocoon of calm, silencing the cries that had pierced the night for hours. Lila's eyes, deep as midnight, softened as she traced a finger along the baby's cheek. "You're safe now, little one," she whispered. "I've got you." The door slammed open, shattering the stillness. Nathaniel Grayson stormed in, his tailored suit rumpled, eyes blazing with a fury that could crack stone. "What the hell are you doing, Lila?" His voice was a blade, sharp and unforgiving. "You're the help, not her mother. You clean, you serve. You don't hold my daughter like she's yours." Lila's breath caught, her arms instinctively tightening around Sophie. The baby stirred, a whimper escaping her lips. Lila stood, slow and deliberate, her gaze meeting Nathaniel's without flinching. She was crying, "Mr. Grayson," for hours. "I tried everything. Bottles, rocking, white noise. She only settled when I held her." Nathaniel's jaw clenched, his hands fisted at his sides. He stepped forward, towering over her, and yanked Sophie from her arms with a force that made Lila's heart lurch. The baby's wail erupted, shrill and panicked, her tiny body thrashing against her father's rigid hold. "Shh, Sophie, it's me," Nathaniel murmured, his voice softening but strained, like a man pleading with a storm. "Daddy's here!" But Sophie's cries only grew, her face red, her hands clawing at the air, as if reaching for Lila. Lila's chest ached, her hands trembling at her sides. She stepped forward, voice low but firm. "Please, Mr. Grayson, give her back. She's scared. You're scaring her." Nathaniel froze, his eyes darting to Sophie, then to Lila. The nursery silence was deafening, broken only by the child's desperate sobs. His shoulders sagged, a flicker of defeat crossing his face. He handed Sophie back, his movements reluctant, almost ashamed. The moment Lila's arms enveloped her, Sophie curled into her chest, cries fading to soft hiccups within seconds. Lila sank back to the rug, rocking gently, her lullaby resuming as if it had never stopped. "There you go, sweet girl," she murmured. "I'm right here." Nathaniel stood rooted, his breath uneven, watching the scene unfold. His eyes, once sharp with rage, now held a storm of confusion. Anger warring with something softer, something he couldn't name. The chandelier's light caught the edge of his face, revealing lines etched by grief, not time. He opened his mouth, then closed it, the weight of his outburst hanging heavy in the air. Lila didn't look at him. Her focus remained on Sophie, her hands steady despite the pulse hammering in her throat. She'd heard words like his before, on Brooklyn stoops, in crowded shelters from men and women who saw her as less than human. But Sophie's trust, the way the baby's fingers clung to her, was a shield against the sting. The nursery door creaked, and Mrs. Helen, the gray-haired housekeeper, appeared, her eyes sharp and knowing. "She's quiet now," Helen said, her voice low, almost a warning. "Only with her." She glanced at Nathaniel, then back to Lila, a silent message passing between them. Nathaniel's gaze flickered to Helen, then back to Lila, but he said nothing. He turned and strode out, the door clicking shut behind him. Lila exhaled, her shoulders easing as Sophie's breathing steadied. She brushed a curl from the baby's forehead, her past flickering in her mind. A mother lost to illness, a childhood spent invisible in a world that didn't care. "You're not alone," she whispered to Sophie, though the words felt like a promise to herself. Outside, the wind howled against the mansion's walls, carrying whispers of secrets yet to be uncovered. Lila's eyes drifted to the door, where Nathaniel's shadow had lingered moments ago. Something in his gaze, beneath the anger, had cracked open, like a door left ajar. She didn't trust it, not yet. But Sophie's warmth against her chest was enough, for now, to keep her here, in a house that felt more like a cage than a home. What had Nathaniel buried in his rage? And why did Sophie, a child born to wealth, find peace only in the arms of a woman the world deemed unworthy? The answers lay hidden, waiting to unravel, as the night stretched on, heavy with unspoken truths. Lila's hands moved with mechanical precision, folding linens in the dim glow of the laundry room, but her mind was still in the nursery, tethered to Sophie's soft breaths. The sting of Nathaniel's words lingered. "You're the help, not her mother." But it was the baby's trust, those tiny fingers clutching her blouse, that anchored her. She hummed her mother's lullaby, the notes a faint echo of a Brooklyn tenement, where cold seeped through cracked windows and love was the only warmth. Lila's mother, Esther, had sung it through fevered nights, her voice a lifeline, until illness stole her away, when Lila was just 16. The memory cut deep, but Lila buried it, stacking towels with a steadiness born of survival. Sophie's cries had haunted the night again. Lila had tried everything: pacifiers, a swaying crib, the hum of a white noise machine. But the baby only quieted when nestled against her chest. She'd stayed on the rug until dawn, eyes burning, heart heavy with a truth she couldn't name. Sophie needed her, and that need was both a gift and a chain. Mrs. Helen's shadow fell across the doorway, her face etched with lines that spoke of years spent guarding secrets. "She slept through, didn't she?" Helen's voice was low, almost accusatory. "Only with you." Lila nodded, avoiding the older woman's gaze. "She's fussy otherwise, I don't know why." Helen stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You're not the first to get too close to that child. Others tried, they didn't last." Her words hung heavy, like damp air before a storm. "Be careful, Lila. This house, it doesn't forgive those who dig too deep." Lila's hands stilled on a folded sheet. "What do you mean?" Helen's lips tightened, as if weighing a truth too heavy to share. "Just watch yourself. Not everything here is what it seems." She turned to leave, then paused. "And don't ask about Claire. Not if you want to stay." The name Claire hit like a stone in still water. Lila's pulse quickened, but she kept her face blank, nodding as Helen disappeared down the hall. Alone, she reached into her apron pocket, fingers brushing a crumpled note she'd found slipped under the nursery door at dawn. "Don't ask about Claire." The words, scrawled in jagged ink, felt like a warning carved into her skin. She tucked it deeper, her resolve hardening. She'd stay for Sophie, but she'd keep her eyes open. The day dragged on, each task a reminder of her place. She polished silver, swept floors, and served coffee to Nathaniel, who sat at the dining table, his eyes fixed on a tablet, his tie askew. He didn't look at her, but his silence was louder than his rage the night before. Lila set the coffee down, her movements deliberate, and caught a flicker of his gaze, brief, conflicted, then gone. That night, Sophie's cries pierced the quiet again. Lila was there before anyone else, lifting the baby from her crib, rocking her gently. "Shh, sweet girl, I'm here," she whispered, her lullaby weaving through the darkness. The cries faded, Sophie's tiny body melting into her. Lila sank to the rug, exhaustion tugging at her bones, but her heart steadied with purpose. Footsteps approached. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his silhouette rigid against the hall's amber glow. Why does she do that? His voice was quieter now, frayed with something like defeat. Why only you? Lila met his gaze, unflinching. She feels safe with me, Mr. Grayson. That's all I know. He stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. You're not her mother. No, Lila said, her voice steady but sharp. But I'm what she has. The words landed like a challenge, and Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He lingered, watching as Sophie's breasts evened out, her tiny hand curled around Lila's finger. Then he turned and left, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed in Lila's chest. Morning brought no relief. Lila moved through the kitchen, preparing breakfast trays, when Rosa, a young maid with nervous eyes, sidled up. You're braver than most, Rosa whispered, glancing over her shoulder. Getting close to Sophie like that. The last one who did. She was gone in a week. Lila's stomach twisted. Gone how? Rosa hesitated, then leaned closer. Her name was Maria. She asked too many questions about Claire. Mrs. Grayson. Found something she shouldn't have. The next day her room was empty. They said she quit, but... Rosa's voice dropped. Her things were burned out back. Lila's fingers tightened around a tray. What did she find? Rosa shook her head. I don't know, but it was something big. Something about the company. Be careful, Lila. They're watching you. The air felt thicker now, every creak of the house a warning. Lila carried the tray to the dining room, her mind racing. Nathaniel sat there, his coffee untouched, eyes distant. She set the tray down, her voice low. Mr. Grayson, what happened to the last maid who held Sophie? His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. She left. Why? Lila held his gaze, her heart pounding. Just curious. She turned away, but not before catching the shadow that crossed his face. Guilt, fear, or something darker. As she returned to the kitchen, her hand brushed the note in her pocket. Don't ask about Claire. But Lila wasn't one to obey warnings. Not when Sophie's peace depended on her. Not when the truth was a shadow creeping closer, ready to swallow them all. What had Maria uncovered? And what price would Lila pay for daring to look? Lila's fingers trembled as she tucked the crumpled note deeper into her apron. Its words, don't ask about Claire, burning like a brand against her skin. Sophie's soft coos pulled her back to the nursery, where the baby lay in her crib, eyes fluttering with the promise of sleep. Lila's lullaby resumed, a fragile thread of calm woven through the night, but her mind churned. Rosa's warning about Maria, the maid who vanished after digging into Claire's secrets, clung to her like damp fog. She glanced at the door, half expecting shadows to move. They didn't, but the silence felt alive, watching. Morning broke with a gray chill, the mansion's grandeur muted by a restless hum. Lila moved through her tasks, polishing banisters, brewing coffee, her eyes scanning every corner for answers. Nathaniel's presence at breakfast was a storm cloud, his gaze fixed on his tablet, avoiding her. She set his coffee down, the porcelain clinking softly, and caught a flicker of something in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or fear. Lila, he said abruptly, his voice low, almost hesitant. I need to speak with you, in my office, now. She followed, her pulse quickening, the note in her pocket a silent weight. Nathaniel's office was a fortress of glass and steel, screens glowing with data, a stark contrast to the nursery's softness. He gestured to a chair, but Lila stood, arms crossed, her dark eyes steady. What is it, Mr. Grayson? He rubbed his temples, the lines on his face deeper than the night before. I was wrong, he said, the words heavy like stones dropped into still water. What I said to you, about Sophie, it was cruel. I'm sorry. Lila's breath caught, but she kept her voice even. Sorry doesn't change what you said, but it's a start. He nodded, his gaze dropping to the desk. Sophie needs you, I see that now, and I need your help with something else. He turned a screen toward her, displaying a sleek app interface labeled Single Mother's Haven. This is my project, a digital platform for single mothers, resources, support, anonymity. I started it after Claire left, but my team doesn't get it. They don't know what it's like to be alone, To need help and find none. You do. Lila's eyes narrowed, her past flashing, nights in a Brooklyn shelter, her mother's cough echoing in a crumbling apartment. I'm no tech expert, Mr. Grayson. I don't need tech, he said, leaning forward, his voice earnest. I need truth. You've lived it. Tell me what this app needs. She studied the screen, then him. A place to speak without fear. Anonymous forums. Women like me. We don't trust easily. We need somewhere to be heard, not judged. Nathaniel scribbled a note, his eyes brightening. That's good. That's exactly it. He paused, then softer. You're more than I thought, Lila. Her chest tightened, but she held his gaze. And Claire? What happened to her? Rosa said she found something. Something about your company. His face shuddered, a wall slamming down. Claire left. After Sophie, she wasn't herself. She walked out one night. That's all. His voice cracked, betraying the lie beneath. Lila stepped closer, her voice low. And Maria, the maid who asked about her, did she leave too? Nathaniel's eyes flashed, a mix of anger and guilt. You're pushing too far, Lila. Am I? She shot back. I'm here for Sophie, but I won't stay blind. He stood, towering over her, but his voice softened. Stay for her, please. I'll tell you what I can, when I can. She nodded, not trusting him, but trusting the weight of Sophie's need. As she left, her hand brushed the note in her pocket, its warning now a challenge. That night, Sophie's cries pulled her back to the nursery. Lila lifted her, humming, the baby's warmth a balm against the storm in her heart. Nathaniel appeared, silent, watching from the doorway. He didn't speak, but his presence felt different. Less like a master, more like a man lost. At dawn, Rosa caught Lila in the pantry, her eyes darting nervously. You're stirring things up, she whispered. I heard them talking. Jeffrey Klein, the CFO. He was furious when he saw you with Mr. Grayson. Said you're trouble, that you're digging where you shouldn't. Lila's stomach nodded. What did Claire find, Rosa? Rosa hesitated, then leaned in. Something about money, big money moving where it shouldn't. She was scared, Lila, then she was gone. Be careful, Jeffrey's not just talk. Lila nodded, her resolve hardening. As Rosa slipped away, a new message buzzed on Lila's phone. The number blocked. Check the safe in his office. Code 9274. Her breath hitched. The mansion's walls seemed to close in, each shadow a threat. She glanced at Sophie's crib, the baby's peaceful face a stark contrast to the chaos brewing. Lila wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a keeper of secrets, and the truth was a flame she couldn't ignore. Who was behind the message? And what would Lila find in that safe, buried in the heart of Nathaniel's empire? Lila's heart pounded as she slipped through the shadowed hallway, the anonymous text. Check the safe in his office. Code 9274. Burning in her mind like a lit fuse. Sophie's soft coos from the nursery lingered in her ears, a reminder of why she hadn't run. The baby's trust was a tether, binding her to this house of secrets, even as Rosa's warning about Jeffrey Klein and the vanished maid Maria echoed like a pulse. Lila's fingers brushed the note in her apron, its jagged scrawl. Don't ask about Claire. A silent scream. She couldn't stop now. Not for Sophie. The mansion was a labyrinth of silence at midnight, its grandeur cloaked in darkness. Lila moved swiftly, her sneakers silent on the marble floor, her breath shallow as she reached Nathaniel's office. The door creaked open, revealing a room of glass and steel, screens dormant but humming with latent power. Her eyes locked on the safe, a sleek black box hidden behind a framed abstract painting. She slid the frame aside, her fingers trembling as she punched in the code. 9274. The lock clicked, a sound like a bone snapping. Inside, a stack of documents waited. Ledgers, bank statements, emails with cryptic subject lines. Her pulse raced as she scanned them, her Brooklyn-honed instincts catching phrases like offshore transfers and unreported assets. At the bottom, a single letter, folded tight, inked in red. Lila's breath hitched as she unfolded it. They'll never let me speak. If I'm gone, Protect her. Claire! The words clawed at her, each letter a wound. Claire hadn't just left. She'd been silenced. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Lila shoved the letter into her pocket, slamming the safe shut and swinging the painting back just as Nathaniel appeared, his silhouette sharp against the doorway's glow. Lila? His voice was low, laced with suspicion. What are you doing here? Her heart hammered, but she faced him, chin high. Cleaning. Or is that against the rules now, Mr. Grayson? His eyes narrowed, scanning the room. At midnight? Don't lie to me. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Then don't lie to me. Claire didn't just leave, did she? She found something about your company, and now she's gone. Nathaniel's face paled, his hands clenching. You're out of line, Lila. Am I? She snapped, pulling the letter from her pocket, holding it like a weapon. This is Claire's. She said, they silenced her. Who's they, Nathaniel? And what does it have to do with Sophie? He stared at the letter, his breath uneven. For a moment he looked broken. Not a billionaire, but a man drowning in grief. You don't understand, he said, voice cracking. Claire was unwell. After Sophie, she spiraled. Depression, paranoia. She found things, transactions, deals, but she didn't understand them. She thought they were threats. She left a note, then disappeared. I found her, too late, by the lake. Gone. Lila's throat tightened, but her eyes didn't waver. And Maria, the maid who asked questions, did she leave too, or did someone make her disappear? Nathaniel flinched, his voice low. Maria quit. I don't know what stories you're hearing, but you're wrong. Then tell me the truth. Lila's voice rose, sharp with desperation. I'm here for Sophie, but I won't stay in a house built on lies. Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I'm trying to protect her. Those deals, they're from years ago. I didn't know the details. I swear, Lila, I'm not the enemy. She held his gaze, the letter trembling in her hand. Then who is? Before he could answer, a shadow moved outside the office. A figure, fleeting but deliberate. Lila's heart lurched. Someone's there, she whispered, shoving the letter back into her pocket. Nathaniel spun, but the hall was empty. His jaw tightened. Stay with Sophie. Don't do this alone. I already am, Lila said, her voice cold. She brushed past him, her mind racing. Back in the nursery, Sophie's cries greeted her, a beacon in the dark. Lila lifted her, humming softly, the baby's warmth easing the chill in her bones. I've got you, she whispered, but her eyes darted to the door. Morning brought a new face. Jeffrey Klein, Grayson Global's CFO, his smile sharp as a blade. He stood in the dining room, eyeing Lila as she served coffee. You're the one keeping Sophie quiet, he said, his tone oily. Impressive for a maid, but you're getting too comfortable, aren't you? Lila met his gaze, unflinching. I do my job, Mr. Klein. His smile widened, predatory. Keep it that way. Curiosity can be dangerous. She turned away, her hands slipping to the letter in her pocket. Claire's words burned. Protect her. Lila's resolve hardened. She'd stay for Sophie, but she'd watch. That night, she taped a small camera to the nursery's bookshelf, its lens hidden in the shadows. The mansion's secrets were closing in, and Lila wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a hunter, chasing a truth that could burn everything down. Who was Jeffrey hiding? And what would Claire's letter cost Lila to uncover? Lila's fingers grazed the hidden camera in the nursery, its tiny lens a silent sentinel against the shadows that seemed to breathe with menace. Claire's letter, tucked in her apron, was a weight heavier than Sophie's sleeping form. Its words, they'll never let me speak. A warning that pulsed in her veins. Jeffrey Klein's predatory smile lingered in her mind, his words a venomous barb. Curiosity can be dangerous. Lila rocked Sophie gently, her lullaby a fragile shield against the storm brewing in her heart. The baby's warmth anchored her, but the mansion's silence was a predator, waiting to pounce. Morning brought no reprieve. Lila moved through her tasks, her eyes scanning every face. Maids who avoided her gaze, footmen who whispered behind cupped hands. Jeffrey's poison had spread. She felt it in the sidelong glances, The hushed rumors that she was too close to Sophie, too bold for a maid. She served Nathaniel's coffee, her hands steady despite the fire in her chest. He looked up, his eyes softer than before, but still guarded. "Lila," he said, voice low, "we need to talk about the app. Your ideas, they're gaining traction." She nodded, her throat tight. "Later. Sophie needs me first." His gaze lingered, a flicker of gratitude mixed with something unspoken. But she turned away, Claire's letter burning against her hip. In the nursery, Sophie's cries were softer today, but her tiny hands clung to Lila's blouse, as if sensing the danger creeping closer. Lila hummed, her mother's melody weaving through the air, but her eyes darted to the camera feed on her phone. Nothing yet. She kissed Sophie's forehead, whispering, "You're my light, little one." But the darkness was closing in. That afternoon, Rosa caught her in the pantry, her voice a hurried whisper. "They're talking about you, Lila. Jeffrey's spreading lies. Says you're after Mr. Grayson's money, using Sophie to get it. He's dangerous. I heard him on the phone, saying you're digging too deep, like Claire did." Lila's stomach nodded, her fingers brushing the letter. "What did Claire know, Rosa? Tell me." Rosa's eyes darted to the door. "Money, dirty money, offshore accounts, fake contracts. Claire found proof, confronted someone. Then she was gone. Jeffrey was there. Lila, he knew." Before Lila could press further, a crash echoed from the nursery. She bolted, heart pounding, to find Sophie's crib untouched, but a stuffed bear lay on the floor, its seam torn. Her phone buzzed. The camera feed showed a figure, cloaked in shadow, slipping out the nursery door. Lila's blood ran cold. She scooped Sophie up, the baby's whimpers fading in her arms. "Shh, I've got you," she murmured, but her eyes were on the door, where the shadow had vanished. That night, Nathaniel found her in the nursery, Sophie asleep against her chest. "You're still here," he said, his voice a mix of relief and strain. "I thought you might leave. After everything." Lila's gaze was steel. "I stay for her, but I need answers, Nathaniel. Who was in here today, and why does Jeffrey Klein want me gone?" He stiffened, his face paling. "Jeffrey? What's he done?" She stood, careful not to wake Sophie, and pulled out Claire's letter. "This," Claire wrote it. "She found something, your company's secrets, and now someone's watching me. Someone was in this room." Nathaniel's eyes widened, scanning the letter. "I didn't know." Claire was frantic, talking about deals, threats. "I thought it was her illness. I tried to protect her, but—" His voice broke. "I failed her, Lila. I won't fail Sophie. Or you." "Then tell me who to trust," she said, her voice low, fierce. "Because I'm not sure it's you." He flinched, but before he could answer, her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She answered, her heart racing. A distorted voice hissed, "Leave the mansion, Lila, or you'll end up like Claire." The line went dead. Nathaniel grabbed her arm, his grip urgent but gentle. "Who was that?" "I don't know," she said, pulling away. "But they know I'm close to the truth." The next morning, Lila caught Jeffrey in the dining room, his eyes glinting as he sipped his coffee. "Trouble sleeping, Lila?" he asked, his voice smooth as oil. "You look tense." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I sleep fine, Mr. Klein, but I'm watching, always." His smile faltered, a crack in his polished facade. "Careful now. This house doesn't take kindly to prying eyes." Lila turned away, her heart pounding, but her resolve ironclad. She checked the camera feed that night, her breath catching as it revealed a fleeting image. A man in a dark coat, face obscured, lingering outside the nursery. The same figure from the day before. She saved the footage, her mind racing. Jeffrey wasn't just a threat. He was a predator, and Sophie was in his sights. As she rocked Sophie, Lila's lullaby trembled, not with fear but with defiance. She'd protect this child no matter the cost. But the mansion's shadows were growing longer, and the truth was a blade, sharp and unforgiving. Who was the man in the dark coat? And how far would Jeffrey go to keep Claire's secrets buried? Lila's phone buzzed in the dead of night, the screen's glow slicing through the nursery's darkness like a blade. Sophie slept against her chest, her tiny breaths a fragile anchor, but the message, come to the Brooklyn warehouse, alone, or Sophie pays, sent ice through Lila's veins. Claire's letter, hidden in her apron, whispered its warning. They'll never let me speak. Jeffrey Klein's predatory grin flashed in her mind, his threat now a noose tightening around her heart. She kissed Sophie's forehead, whispering, I'll keep you safe, and slipped the baby into her crib, her resolve afire against the fear. She moved swiftly, pulling on a dark jacket, tucking a folding knife into her pocket. The mansion's silence was suffocating, each creak a taunt. Nathaniel's office door was ajar, but he wasn't there. Lila hesitated, then sent him a text. Stay with Sophie. Trouble. She slipped out, the night swallowing her. Brooklyn's rain-slicked streets glistened under flickering streetlights, the warehouse a hulking shadow on the waterfront. Lila's sneakers splashed through puddles, her pulse hammering as she approached the rusted door. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and menace, shadows pooling in corners. A single bulb swayed, casting jagged light across a figure tied to a chair. Sophie, her tiny face pale, eyes wide with terror. Jeffrey Klein stood beside her, a gun glinting in his hand, his smile a razor's edge. You're punctual, Lila, he said, voice smooth as venom. Smarter than Claire, but just as foolish. Lila's heart lurched, but her voice was steel. Let her go, Jeffrey. This is between us. He laughed, low and cruel. You think you're a hero? Claire thought so too. She found my accounts. Millions siphoned off Grayson Global. Tried to play whistleblower. I made sure she stayed quiet. His eyes gleamed. You're next, unless you walk away. Lila stepped closer, her knife a cold weight in her pocket. Sophie's just a baby. Let her go and I'll disappear. Jeffrey's smile widened. You don't get it. You're not just a maid anymore. You're a threat. He cocked the gun, aiming at Sophie. Move, and she's done. Lila's mind raced, her eyes locked on Sophie's trembling form. She slid her phone from her sleeve, thumb tapping a preset distress signal to Nathaniel, sent before she'd left. You're wrong about me, she said, voice steady, buying time. I'm nobody. But Sophie? She's everything. You can't scare away love, Jeffrey. Not hers, not mine. He sneered, stepping closer. Love? You're a fool, just like Claire. She thought she could save Nathaniel's empire. Look where it got her. Drowned in a lake, her secrets with her. Lila's chest tightened, but she held his gaze. And you think you'll win? Hiding behind a gun? Threatening a child? You're the fool, Jeffrey. A distant siren wailed, faint but growing louder. Jeffrey's eyes flickered, his grip tightening. What did you do? He snarled. Lila's voice dropped, fierce. What I had to. She lunged not for him, but for Sophie, shielding the baby as the warehouse door burst open. Nathaniel charged in, flanked by two officers, their guns drawn. Drop it, Klein, one shouted. Jeffrey spun, firing wildly. A bullet grazed Lila's arm, searing pain flaring, but she clutched Sophie tighter, diving behind a crate. The baby's cries pierced the chaos, and Lila whispered, I've got you, sweet girl, her lullaby trembling through the gunfire. Nathaniel tackled Jeffrey, wrenching the gun away as the officers swarmed, cuffs snapping around Jeffrey's wrists. Lila rocked Sophie, her blood staining the baby's blanket, but her arms were steady. Shh, you're safe now, she murmured, the cries fading to hiccups as Sophie nestled into her. Nathaniel knelt beside them, his face ashen, hands shaking as he touched Sophie's cheek, then Lila's. You're hurt, he said, voice raw. It's nothing, Lila said, her eyes fierce. She's safe. That's what matters. He shook his head, eyes glistening. You're what matters, Lila. To her, to me. The officers dragged Jeffrey away, his curses echoing in the damp air. Lila stood, Sophie clinging to her, and followed Nathaniel to the waiting ambulance. The rain had stopped, the city's lights flickering like stars through the mist. In the ambulance, Lila held Sophie close, her lullaby a soft defiance against the night's terror. Nathaniel sat beside her, his hand brushing hers, a silent vow. Back at the mansion, dawn broke, casting pale light through the nursery's windows. Lila settled Sophie into her crib, the baby's eyes fluttering shut. Nathaniel stood behind her, his voice low. I didn't know how deep this went. Jeffrey, he destroyed Claire. I won't let him take you. Lila turned, her gaze sharp. Then stop hiding, Nathaniel. For Sophie. For me. He nodded, his eyes raw with a truth he couldn't yet speak. Lila's arm throbbed, but her heart was steady. The mansion's shadows were retreating, but the fight wasn't over. Jeffrey was gone, but his secrets lingered, and Lila knew the truth was a blade still poised to strike. What had Jeffrey left behind? And could Lila and Nathaniel face it together? Lila's arm throbbed beneath the bandage, a dull reminder of the warehouse's chaos. But Sophie's soft weight against her chest dulled the pain. The nursery's quiet was a fragile sanctuary, the baby's breaths a steady rhythm against the storm still raging in Lila's heart. Claire's letter, now tucked in a drawer, whispered its truth. They'll never let me speak. But Jeffrey Klein's arrest had cracked the mansion's silence open. Lila hummed her mother's lullaby, her eyes scanning the room, half expecting shadows to stir. They didn't, but the weight of unseen eyes lingered. Morning brought a frenzy. News vans crowded the mansion's gates, cameras flashing like vultures circling. Nathaniel stood in the dining room, his face haggard, tie undone. They want a statement, he said, voice rough. About Jeffrey, about everything. Lila set a coffee cup before him, her gaze steady. Then tell them the truth. Sophie deserves that. He looked at her, eyes raw with something deeper than gratitude. You deserve it too, Lila. After what you did, I owe you everything. She shook her head, her voice low. I did it for her, but I need to know you're with me, Nathaniel. No more secrets. He nodded, a promise unspoken but heavy. Lila returned to the nursery where Sophie babbled, clutching a crayon, her tiny fingers smudging a drawing. Lila knelt, smiling. What's this, sweet girl? Sophie giggled, holding up a scrawl of colors, a stick figure with dark curls labeled Mama Lila. Lila's breath caught, tears stinging as she hugged the baby close. The word Mama, a wound and a gift. The press conference was set for noon, a stark room in Grayson Global's headquarters buzzing with reporters. Lila stood at Nathaniel's side, her navy dress simple but defiant, her bandaged arm a silent badge of courage. Nathaniel faced the cameras, his voice steady but laced with fire. Jeffrey Klein betrayed this company and my family. He siphoned millions through offshore accounts, hid his crimes behind lies, but he didn't act alone. We're launching a full investigation to root out every shadow in Grayson Global. A reporter thrust a microphone forward. And Ms. Brooks? What's her role in this? Nathaniel's eyes met Lila's, unwavering. Lila Brooks saved my daughter's life. She uncovered the truth when I couldn't. She's not just a hero. She's my advisor, my partner in rebuilding this company. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some skeptical, others awed. A board member, his face pinched, leaned into a microphone. This is irregular, Nathaniel. A maid-turned advisor? The optics. Lila stepped forward, her voice cutting through like a blade. I was a maid. I'm still black, still from Brooklyn's shadows. But I know what it's like to be invisible, to fight for scraps of hope. That's why I'm here, to make sure no one else is silenced, like Claire was. The room stilled, her words a thunderclap. Nathaniel's hand brushed hers, a fleeting anchor. Reporters scribbled furiously, but Lila's eyes were on Sophie, safe with Mrs. Helen backstage, clutching her drawing. Back at the mansion, the air was thick with fallout. Board members whispered of instability, their emails sharp with accusations that Lila was a disruptor. Nathaniel shut them down, his voice iron. She stays, or I walk. Lila overheard, her chest tightening. She wasn't here for power, but for Sophie, and for the truth Claire died for. That evening, Lila found Sophie in the nursery, her tiny hands smudging more colors onto paper. Lila sat beside her, her voice soft. You're a little artist, aren't you? Sophie beamed, holding up her drawing. Another stick figure, this time with Nathaniel beside Mama Lila. Lila's heart clenched, tears spilling as she hugged the baby. You're my world, she whispered, But the board's whispers echoed in her mind. They'd never accept her. Nathaniel appeared, his silhouette softer now, less a billionaire than a father. "She loves you," he said, voice thick. "More than I thought possible." Lila looked up, her eyes fierce. "She's why I stayed, Nathaniel. Through Jeffrey, through the lies. But they're still out there, aren't they? People like him." He knelt beside her, his hand hovering near hers. "Yes, but we'll face them together. I was wrong, Lila. About you, about everything. You didn't just save Sophie, you saved me." She held his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I know, but you're not alone anymore." Lila looked at Sophie's drawing, Mama Lila scrawled in childish crayon. She wasn't just a maid, not anymore. She was a shield, a voice, a mother in all but name. The mansion's shadows still loomed, but Lila's resolve was brighter, fiercer. She'd fight for Sophie, for Claire's truth, for the women like her who'd been silenced too long. What would the board do next? And how would Lila's new role reshape the shadows still clinging to their lives? Lila's fingers traced the edge of Sophie's crayon drawing. Mama Lila scrawled in wobbly letters, its colors a beacon in the quiet nursery. The weight of the press conference lingered, her voice echoing before a sea of cameras, Nathaniel's hand brushing hers, the board's whispers branding her a disruptor. But Sophie's trust, her tiny hand clutching Lila's, was a fire that burned brighter than their scorn. Lila hummed her mother's lullaby, the notes softer now, less a shield and more a promise. The mansion's shadows had retreated, but their chill still clung to her skin, a reminder of truths unearthed and battles yet to come. Morning spilled golden light through the nursery's windows, casting halos around Sophie's crib. Lila sat in the rocking chair, her bandaged arm a faint ache, watching the baby sleep, her chubby fist tucked under her cheek. Nathaniel's words, "You saved me," echoed in her chest, stirring a hope she'd long buried. She'd fought for Sophie, for Claire's truth, but could she trust this fragile warmth? Downstairs, the dining room hummed with new life. Sophie's drawings were taped to the fridge, a splash of color against a sterile steel. Nathaniel stood at the counter, attempting pancakes, his sleeves rolled, flour dusting his hands. "You're staring," he said, catching Lila's eye, a half smile breaking through his usual reserve. "You're burning them," Lila replied, her voice teasing but soft. She slid beside him, taking the spatula. "Move over before you set off the alarms." Sophie giggled from her high chair, waving a sippy cup. "Daddy funny," she chirped, her curls bouncing. Lila's heart swelled, the word mama from the drawing still a tender wound. She flipped a pancake, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's. "She's happy," she said quietly. "That's new." He nodded, his gaze steady. "Because of you." Lila looked away, her throat tight. "Don't say that like it's simple. This house, it's still a battlefield." "Not anymore," he said, stepping closer. "You changed it, Lila. You changed us." Before she could respond, Mrs. Helen appeared, holding a small envelope, her eyes softer than usual. "Found this in the attic, tucked in an old book. It's for you." Lila took it, her pulse quickening. The handwriting, her mother's, felt like a ghost's touch. She opened it, her breath catching. "You don't need to be perfect, Lila. Just be strong. Love always, Esther." Tears stung, memories of Brooklyn's cold nights flooding back, her mother's lullaby, her fierce love despite a world that offered none. Lila clutched the letter, her voice trembling. "She always knew I'd need this." Nathaniel's hand rested on her shoulder, warm and sure. "She'd be proud. I am." That afternoon, Lila stood before a modest storefront in East Harlem, the sign above reading Warm Floor Foundation. It was hers, a haven for women like her, who'd slept on floors to keep others warm, who'd been told they were nothing. Inside, 2 desks, a worn couch, and a dream born from her own scars. She met her first client, a single mother named Tanya, her eyes hollow but hopeful. "I'm not here to fix you," Lila said, her voice steady. "I'm here to remind you you're not broken." Tanya's tears fell, and Lila held her hand, the echo of her mother's strength guiding her. Word spread, and by week's end, Lila had helped 5 women find jobs, childcare, a chance to breathe. Nathaniel offered a grant, but she shook her head. "This is mine," she said, her eyes fierce. "I need to build it myself." He smiled, a rare warmth. "I know, but I'm here, Lila, always." That evening, the mansion glowed with a new rhythm. Sophie led a clumsy dance in the living room, twirling to a scratchy jazz record, her laughter a melody. Lila joined her, spinning the girl until they collapsed in giggles. Nathaniel watched, his eyes misty, no longer the billionaire who'd once shouted her down, but a father, a man learning to love. "You're good at this," he said, his voice thick, "at being her everything." Lila looked at Sophie, then at him, her heart unsteady. "I'm scared, Nathaniel. Love like this, it's fragile. I've lost too much to believe it lasts." He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "Then let's build it together. Not perfect, but real." She nodded, her fingers tightening around his. The letter from her mother, Sophie's drawing, the foundation. They were threads weaving a life she'd never dared dream. Lila wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning. Outside, spring whispered through the pines, the mansion's frost melting into memory. Lila tucked Sophie into bed, kissing her forehead. "Sleep tight, sweet girl," she whispered, the lullaby soft as moonlight. Nathaniel waited in the hall, his eyes unguarded. "You're home, Lila," he said, voice low. "With us." She smiled, tears brimming. "I'm starting to believe it." In that quiet, with Sophie's breaths and Nathaniel's warmth, Lila felt the shadows lift. The truth had cost her blood, but it had given her a family. What would this new beginning hold? And could Lila's heart, forged in struggle, finally find peace? Lila's journey, from a maid silenced by rage to a beacon of truth, shows that love can shatter even the darkest curses. Sophie's trust and Nathaniel's redemption remind us that home is built not on wealth, but on heart. What did Lila's courage stir in you? Did her fight for Sophie move you to tears? Or did the mansion's secrets keep you on edge? Share your thoughts below. Tell us what you felt, what you predicted, and where you're listening from. Thank you for joining us in this tale of shadows and salvation. Your support lights our way. Until we meet again, keep seeking the truth that sets you free. Stay tuned for more stories that grip the soul. "What the hell did you do?" Jack Sullivan's voice cut like a whip, his eyes burning with rage. Lena Jones stood dripping by the pool, her maid's uniform soaked, meaningless after her dive into the icy water. She'd been dusting the Sullivan mansion's silver when she saw Lily, the billionaire's daughter, slip near the pool's edge. Lena sprinted across the stone courtyard, plunging in to grab the sinking girl. Her arms burned as she pulled Lily to safety, but Jack, arriving in a storm of panic, saw only his shivering child. His briefcase hit the ground. His fear turned to fury. "I pay you to watch her," he roared, not seeing the savior, only a servant who failed. Lena stayed silent, her gaze steady. What secrets hide in this cold mansion? Who watches from the shadows? Subscribe, share where you're listening, what time it is, and guess where this tale of betrayal leads. The air in the Sullivan mansion hung heavy with the scent of polished wood and unspoken tension. A sprawling fortress of glass and marble that gleamed under the late afternoon sun, yet felt like a crypt. Lena Jones moved silently through its halls, her black and white uniform a stark contrast to the opulent chandeliers and velvet drapes. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, dusted a silver candelabra with precision, but her dark eyes darted to every corner, catching the faint flicker of a light bulb, the slight misalignment of a picture frame. She'd been here a month, long enough to sense the undercurrents beneath the mansion's pristine surface. Something was off, though she couldn't yet name it. Outside, the pool glittered like a sapphire, its calm surface belying the chaos about to unfold. Lily Sullivan, 8 years old, her auburn curls bouncing, chased a butterfly across the stone courtyard. Her laughter echoed, a rare sound in this sterile place. Lena paused, her cloth stilling, as she watched the girl inch closer to the water's edge. Jack Sullivan, her father, was nowhere in sight, likely buried in his office, a prisoner of his empire. Lena's instincts prickled. She set the candelabra down, her movements deliberate, and stepped toward the glass doors. "Lily, sweetheart, stay back from the pool," Lena called softly, her voice steady but firm. The girl didn't hear, her small hands reaching for the butterfly as it flitted over the water. Lena's heart quickened. She crossed the threshold, her polished shoes clicking on the stone. Then it happened. A slip, a splash, a stifled scream. Lily's tiny form vanished beneath the surface, bubbles rising in her wake. Lena didn't think. She ran, her uniform tearing slightly as she vaulted over a low hedge, her body slicing through the air. The water hit like 1,000 needles, cold and unforgiving, but her eyes locked onto Lily's sinking silhouette. She dove deeper, her lungs burning, and grasped the girl's limp arm. With a surge of strength, Lena kicked upward, breaking the surface with a gasp. She hauled Lily onto the pool's edge, the girl coughing and trembling, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Lily, breathe, you're okay," Lena murmured, kneeling beside her, brushing wet curls from the girl's face. Her breath came in ragged bursts, water dripping from her braids onto the stone. Lily clung to her, small fingers digging into Lena's arm, a silent plea for comfort. Before Lena could say more, a shadow loomed. "What the hell is this?" Jack Sullivan's voice thundered, raw and jagged. His briefcase thudded to the ground. His tailored suit rumpled from a day of deals. His hazel eyes, usually sharp with calculation, were wild with panic as he rushed to Lily, scooping her into his arms. "Baby, are you hurt?" he whispered, his voice breaking as he checked her for injuries. Lena stood, water pooling at her feet, her uniform clinging like a second skin. She opened her mouth to explain, but Jack whirled on her, his face a mask of fury. "You," he barked, his finger jabbing the air. "I pay you to keep her safe. How could you let this happen?" His words stung, each one a lash, his gaze searing with accusation. He didn't see the dive, the rescue, the desperation in Lena's eyes. He saw only a failure. Lena's jaw tightened, but she held her tongue. She'd learned long ago that men like Jack Sullivan, men who built empires, rarely listened in the heat of anger. Her eyes flicked to Lily, still shivering in her father's arms, and she saw the girl's lips quiver, wanting to speak. "It's okay, Lily," Lena said softly, her voice a lifeline. "You're safe now." Jack's head snapped up, his expression darkening. "Safe? She nearly drowned. You're supposed to watch her, not let her wander into danger." He turned, striding toward the mansion with Lily cradled against him, leaving Lena dripping and dismissed. The glass doors slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gavel. Lena stood alone, the courtyard silent save for the soft lap of the pool. Her hands clenched, then relaxed. She wasn't here to argue or plead. She was here to work, to watch, to notice. And she'd noticed plenty. The flickering lights, the misplaced keys, the strange static on the security monitors late at night. This house, for all its grandeur, was a machine with gears grinding out of sync. Her father, a watchmaker, had taught her to spot the smallest flaws in a mechanism, to listen for the tick that didn't belong. This mansion, this family was no different. She bent to retrieve Jack's forgotten briefcase, her fingers brushing the fine leather. As she straightened, her eyes caught a glint from the poolside, a tiny hairpin, Lily's half hidden under a planter. It hadn't been there yesterday. Lena's brow furrowed. She slipped it into her pocket, her mind already turning. Something was wrong here, and it wasn't just a child's misstep. Inside, Jack sat Lily by the fireplace, wrapping her in a blanket. His hands shook as he dialed the family doctor, his voice low but urgent. "She's fine, just shaken," he said, glancing at his daughter. But his mind churned. How had this happened? He'd trusted the staff, trusted the system. His eyes flicked to the security console on the wall, its green light steady. He'd check the footage later. For now, Lily was all that mattered. Lena returned to the servants' quarters, peeling off her soaked uniform. She hung it to dry, her movements methodical, but her thoughts raced. The hairpin, the static, the coldness in Jack's eyes. She pulled a small notebook from her apron, its pages filled with neat, precise notes. August 3rd, 11:47 p.m. Kitchen light flickered twice. August 5th, front gate sensor tripped. No visitor logged. She added a new entry. August 7th, Lily's hairpin by the pool. Not there yesterday. Her pen paused. This wasn't just a house. It was a puzzle, and she was beginning to see its pieces. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the estate, Lena closed her notebook. She wasn't just a maid. She was a witness, a keeper of secrets this mansion didn't yet know it held. And she would watch silently until the truth surfaced. The Sullivan mansion's silence was louder than its echoes, a weight that pressed against Lena Jones as she moved through its polished corridors the next morning. She carried a tray of coffee to Jack Sullivan's study, her steps measured, her eyes scanning for the smallest irregularities. A vase turned slightly askew, a curtain pulled an inch too far. Yesterday's chaos at the pool lingered in her mind, not for Jack's harsh words, but for the hairpin she'd found, its delicate curve out of place. She'd added it to her mental tally, another tick in the mansion's unsteady rhythm. Jack sat at his mahogany desk, his face haggard, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. Lily was upstairs, tucked in bed after the doctor's visit, her small frame still shaken but unharmed. He'd spent the night replaying the incident, his guilt a tight knot in his chest. He'd been too quick to judge Lena, too consumed by fear to see the truth. The security footage would clear things up. He opened his laptop, pulling up the camera feed from the pool. Lena knocked softly, entering with the tray. "Your coffee, Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice even, betraying none of the tension from yesterday. She set the cup down, her movements precise, but her gaze flicked to the laptop screen, catching a glimpse of the frozen frame. Lily by the pool, moments before the fall. Jack's eyes met hers, softer now, tinged with regret. "Lena," he began, his voice rough. "About yesterday, I was out of line. I saw the footage. You saved her." He paused, rubbing his temple. "I'm sorry." Lena nodded, her expression unreadable. "Lily's safe. That's what matters." She turned to leave, but Jack's voice stopped her. "Wait, there's something else." He gestured to the screen, rewinding the footage. The camera glitched. 3 minutes of static right before she fell. Ever seen that before? Lena's pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. She stepped closer, studying the screen. The timestamp showed 3:42 p.m., then nothing but gray noise until 3:45 p.m., when Lily was already in the water. "Not the first time," she said quietly. She reached into her apron, pulling out a small leather-bound notebook. "May I?" Jack frowned but nodded, curiosity overriding his skepticism. Lena opened the notebook, revealing pages of meticulous entries in her tight, careful script. July 14th, 2:03 a.m. East wing motion sensor triggered, no one present. July 29th, 9:15 p.m. Static on front gate camera, 5 seconds. She flipped to a recent page. 17 anomalies in the last month. Lights flickering, sensors tripping, cameras glitching. Small things, but they add up. Jack leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. 17? Why didn't you say anything? "I'm the help, Mr. Sullivan," Lena said, her tone matter-of-fact but edged with something sharper. "You don't pay me to report glitches, but I notice them." She closed the notebook, her dark eyes steady. "My father was a watchmaker. He taught me that a machine only works if every gear is perfect. A house like this, it's a machine too, and something's wrong with it." Jack stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He'd dismissed her as just a maid, but this was something else. "You're saying someone's tampering with my systems?" His voice was low, almost a growl, but not directed at her now. "I'm saying it's not random," Lena replied. "The hairpin I found by the pool, it wasn't Lily's. Too ornate, not her style. Someone was there before she fell." Jack's jaw tightened. He stood, pacing to the window, the sprawling estate stretching out below. His empire was built on control, on knowing every detail. Yet here was a woman he barely knew seeing things he'd missed. "Why do you notice these things, Lena? What's your story?" She hesitated, her fingers brushing the notebook's edge. "I learned to watch because I had to. Details keep you alive when no one else is looking out for you." Her voice was steady, but a flicker of something, pain perhaps, crossed her face. "You want to know what's happening in this house? Start with the cameras." Jack nodded slowly, his mind racing. I'll have the system checked. But Lena, if you see anything else, you tell me. Directly. She gave a single nod, tucking the notebook away. I will. As she left the study, her steps were as silent as ever, but her mind churned. The hairpin, the static, the mansion's uneasy pulse. They weren't accidents. Someone was playing a game, and she was already steps ahead. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She'd told no one about the whisper she'd heard by the pool, a soft voice urging her to chase the butterfly. It wasn't real, she told herself, but her small hands trembled. She didn't see Lena pass by her door, didn't know the maid's sharp eyes had already caught the shadow of something sinister. In his study, Jack replayed the footage again, the static taunting him. He thought of Lily's frightened eyes, of Lena's notebook, of the empire he'd built that now felt like a house of cards. He didn't know who to trust. His longtime partner, Leo Fisher, with his slick smiles. His loyal butler, Samuel Finch, is always hovering. But Lena, the silent observer, had earned a sliver of his faith. As night fell, the mansion's chandeliers cast fractured light across the halls, and Lena added another note to her book. August 8th, 9:22 a.m. Static confirmed on pool camera. 3 minutes. Hairpin origin unknown. She closed it, her resolve hardening. Whatever was breaking this house, she'd find it. And when she did, no amount of wealth or power would hide the truth. The Sullivan mansion pulsed with a quiet menace, its grand halls masking a growing unease that Lena Jones felt in her bones. She moved through the kitchen, preparing Lily's breakfast tray, her hands steady but her mind racing. The hairpin, the static, the whisper Lily hadn't yet confessed. These were pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. Outside, the morning mist clung to the estate's manicured lawns, shrouding the world in gray. Lena's eyes flicked to the security panel by the door, its green light steady but untrustworthy. Upstairs, Jack Sullivan sat at his desk, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice clipped. Yes, Leo, I'll handle it. But these numbers don't add up. His partner, Leo Fisher, had been pushing for a risky merger, his emails flooding Jack's inbox with promises of profit. But Jack's focus was elsewhere, on the 3-minute glitch Lena had flagged on the hairpin she'd mentioned. He'd called a technician to check the cameras, but doubt gnawed at him. Was it sabotage? And if so, who? Lena knocked lightly, entering with the tray. Lily sat on the couch, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight, her blue eyes distant. Pancakes, sweetheart, Lena said softly, setting the tray on the coffee table. Lily offered a small smile, but her fingers fidgeted, betraying her unease. Lena crouched beside her, her voice low. You feeling okay, Lily? The girl nodded, then hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. Lena, there was a voice, by the pool. It told me to chase the butterfly. Her eyes darted to her father, who was still on the phone, oblivious. Lena's heart skipped. She kept her face calm, but her mind sharpened. A voice! Can you tell me more? Lily shook her head, clutching the rabbit tighter. Lena didn't push. She knew fear could lock a child's words away. You're safe now, she murmured, squeezing Lily's hand. I'm here. Jack ended his call, his gaze shifting to Lena. Everything all right? He asked, his tone softer than before, the edge of yesterday's anger gone. Lily's just shaken, Lena said, standing. She didn't mention the whisper. Not yet. Jack needed facts, not fears, and she needed time to connect the dots. I'll check on her later. Jack nodded, his eyes lingering on his daughter. Guilt twisted in his chest. He'd been too buried in work, too distant. Lena, keep an eye on her today. No more risks. His voice was firm but carried a trace of trust, a shift from the man who'd lashed out by the pool. As Lena left the study, her notebook weighed heavily in her apron. She added a new entry. August 8th, 10:15 a.m. Lily reports a voice by the pool, urging her to chase a butterfly. Source unknown. The whisper was no accident. It was deliberate, a mind game aimed at a child. Someone was targeting not just Jack, but Lily, and that made Lena's blood run cold. Downstairs, the mansion buzzed with routine, but Lena saw cracks in the facade. Samuel Finch, the butler, polished silver in the dining room, his movements stiff, his eyes avoiding hers. She'd always found him loyal but reserved. Now his silence felt heavier. Leo Fisher was due to visit later, his sleek confidence a contrast to Samuel's quiet deference. Lena's instincts told her to watch them both. In his office, Jack opened his laptop only to find an email he didn't remember sending. A proposal marked urgent, riddled with errors that could tank his company's stock. "What the hell?" he muttered, checking the sent folder. Another email, another mistake, all under his name. His pulse quickened. He wasn't this careless. Someone was messing with his systems, his reputation. Lena's words echoed. "It's not random." He stood, pacing, his mind racing. Leo had been pushing harder lately, his smiles too smooth, his suggestions too bold. And Samuel, always present, always watching. Jack's trust in his inner circle was fraying. He needed to play this smart, not tip his hand. Lena's notebook, her quiet vigilance, was his only anchor. Lena, meanwhile, slipped into the security room, her presence unnoticed by the staff. She scanned the camera logs, her fingers tracing timestamps. Another glitch. 2 seconds on the East Wing camera last night. She noted it, her jaw tight. Someone was moving through this house unseen, unheard, but not by her. That afternoon, Leo Fisher arrived, his tailored suit and easy grin filling the room. "Jack, you look like hell," he said, clapping Jack's shoulder. "Rough night?" His tone was light, but his eyes lingered too long, searching for weakness. "Just business," Jack replied, forcing a smile. He'd decided to play along, to act rattled as Lena had suggested over breakfast. "These damn emails keep disappearing. Think I'm losing it." He watched Leo closely, catching the faint smirk that flickered across his face. "Take a break, man," Leo said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Let me handle the merger details." He leaned closer, his tone conspiratorial. "You're spread too thin, Jack. Trust me." Jack nodded, his expression weary but his mind sharp. He was acting now, a performance to draw Leo out. Lena, passing by with a tray, caught his eye, a brief, knowing glance. They were allies now, bound by suspicion. That evening, Lena sat with Lily in her room, reading a story. The girl's voice was small. "Lena, the voice, it said Daddy doesn't love me." Her words hit like a punch. Lena's eyes narrowed, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just sabotage, it was cruelty, aimed at a child's heart. She tucked Lily in, promising, "No one will hurt you, Lily, not while I'm here." As she left, she added another note. August 8th, 6:47 p.m. Lily reports voice claiming, "Daddy doesn't love me." Psychological manipulation confirmed. The mansion's shadows seemed to deepen. But Lena wasn't afraid. She was watching, waiting, and the truth was closer than anyone knew. The Sullivan Mansion's grandeur felt like a mask, its polished surfaces hiding a pulse of deceit that Lena Jones could almost hear. She moved through the servants' quarters, her apron crisp despite the late hour, her notebook tucked close. Lily's whispered confession about the voice, cruel words sowing doubt about her father, had sharpened Lena's focus. Someone wasn't just tampering with cameras. They were weaving a web around this family, and she was determined to cut through it. By midnight, the mansion was still, its chandeliers dimmed to a faint glow. Lena's shoes made no sound as she slipped down the east wing, her eyes scanning for the smallest tells. A door ajar, a shadow out of place. She'd narrowed her suspicions to 2 men, Leo Fisher, with his slick charm and hungry eyes, and Samuel Finch, the butler whose loyalty seemed frayed by fear. Tonight she'd find answers. Samuel's office, a small room off the kitchen, was her target. Lena had noticed his unease earlier, his hands trembling as he poured Leo's coffee during the man's visit. She eased the door open, the lock yielding to a hairpin she'd repurposed, a trick from her father's watchmaking tools. Inside, the room smelled of old books and wax polish. She moved swiftly, her fingers tracing the desk's drawers. The top one held pens, receipts, nothing unusual. The bottom was locked. Her pulse quickened, but her hand stayed steady. She worked the hairpin into the lock, feeling the tumblers click. The drawer slid open, revealing a burner phone, its screen dark, but its presence screaming guilt. Lena powered it on, her breath shallow. A single text thread appeared from an unnamed number. Get the merger files tonight. No mistakes, Finch. You know what's at stake. Another earlier. The girl's an easy target. Keep her scared. Lena's stomach twisted. Lily's voice wasn't a ghost. It was a plan. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Lena froze, her heart hammering. She snapped the phone off, sliding it back into the drawer just as the door creaked. She dove behind a heavy curtain, the velvet swallowing her silhouette. Samuel entered, his face pale, his eyes darting. He clutched a phone, his usual one, not the burner, and dialed, his voice low but panicked. "Mr. Fisher, I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "The girl, she's just a child, and Sullivan's asking questions." Lena held her breath, her body pressed against the wall. Samuel's voice trembled. "If he finds out about my debt, my family, I'm trapped, Fisher." A pause, then a resigned, "Yes, sir, I'll get the files." He hung up, his shoulders sagging, and left, oblivious to Lena's presence. She waited, counting to 30, then slipped out, her mind racing. Samuel was a pawn, coerced by a secret debt, but Leo was the puppeteer, targeting Lily to break Jack. The burner phone was proof, but she needed more. Something undeniable. She returned to her quarters, adding to her notebook. August 8th, 11:58 p.m. Burner phone in Finch's office. Text confirm Fisher's orders. Targeting Lily. Finch coerces, mentions debt. Her pen shook slightly, not from fear, but fury. No one hurt a child on her watch. In his study, Jack sat alone, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across his face. The technician's report had come in. The camera glitch wasn't a malfunction, but a deliberate loop, inserted to hide someone's presence. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion warring with dread. Leo's visit today had left a sour taste. His partner's casual dismissal of the email errors felt too rehearsed. And Samuel, always hovering, had avoided his gaze. Jack's world, built on trust in his team, was cracking. He thought of Lena, her quiet certainty, her notebook of anomalies. She'd seen what he hadn't, and that stung. He opened the security logs again, cross-referencing dates from Lena's notes. Another glitch, 2 nights ago, on the garden camera. Someone was moving through his home, unseen. He needed to act, but rashness could tip his hand. Lena's suggestion to play along, to feign weakness, was starting to make sense. Upstairs, Lily slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by whispers she couldn't place. She clutched her rabbit, its worn fur a small comfort. The voice hadn't returned, but its echo lingered, telling her she wasn't enough for her father. She didn't hear Lena pause outside her door, checking the lock, ensuring her safety. The next morning, Lena served breakfast, her face a mask of calm. Samuel was in the dining room, setting plates, his eyes bloodshot. She watched him, noting the way he flinched when Jack entered. "Morning, Samuel," Jack said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "Everything in order?" "Yes, sir," Samuel muttered, his voice tight. Lena caught the exchange, her mind filing it away. She served Jack his coffee, their eyes meeting briefly, a silent agreement to keep watching. As she cleared the table, Lena overheard Leo's voice on Jack's phone, scheduling another visit. "We'll finalize the merger tomorrow," Leo said, his tone smooth as oil. Jack agreed, his voice strained but convincing. Lena knew he was playing the part, buying time. She added another note. August 9th, 8:14 a.m., Fisher plans merger meeting. Finch's behavior erratic, likely under pressure. The game was escalating, and she was ready. The mansion's clocks ticked on, each second a step closer to truth or ruin. Lena's eyes, sharp as her father's finest tools, missed nothing. She was no longer just a maid. She was the shadow watching the shadows, and she would not blink. The Sullivan mansion's stillness was a lie. Its quiet halls thrumming with secrets, Lena Jones was unraveling, thread by thread. She stood in the pantry, ostensibly restocking supplies, but her mind was on the burner phone, its damning text branding Leo Fisher as the puppet master and Samuel Finch as his reluctant pawn. The knowledge burned in her chest, but she kept her face serene, her hands folding linens with practiced calm. Lily's whispered fears and Jack's fraying trust weighed on her. She had to act, and fast. In his study, Jack Sullivan leaned over a stack of papers, his jaw tight. The tampered emails, the camera glitches, Lena's notebook, they all pointed to a calculated assault on his life. Leo's voice still echoed from yesterday's call, slick with false concern, pushing for the merger that could sink Jack's empire. But Lena's warning had shifted something in him. He wasn't just a target now, he was a player, and he'd play to win. Lena knocked, entering with a tray of tea. "For you, Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice steady, but her eyes held a question. Jack nodded, motioning her to close the door. The room felt smaller, the air thick with their shared secret. "We can't wait any longer," Jack said, his voice low. "Leo's moving too fast. We need to draw him out." He tapped a folder on his desk, labeled Merger Projections. "This is our bait, a fake report showing a catastrophic loss. If Leo's behind this, he'll want it to discredit me." Lena's lips curved slightly, approval in her gaze. "Smart, but it needs to be convincing. Samuel's the weak link. He's scared, not loyal to Fisher. Make him think it's urgent and he'll act." Jack leaned back, studying her. "You've thought this through." "My father fixed watches," Lena said, her tone matter-of-fact. "He taught me to find the weak gear and press it." She pulled out her notebook, flipping to a new page. "Put the folder somewhere Samuel can access. His office, maybe. I'll set up a camera to catch him." Jack nodded, a spark of respect in his eyes. "You're good at this, Lena. Too good for a maid." "I'm good at seeing what's in front of me," she replied, her voice soft but edged. "Let's do this tonight." By dusk, the plan was set. Jack left the fake folder in Samuel's office, its cover marked with bold red ink. Confidential, merger failure. He made a show of calling Leo from the dining room, his voice loud enough to carry. "I'm bringing in a cyber team tomorrow, Leo," he said, pacing. "Someone's screwing with my systems. I'm done playing nice." He hung up, catching Lena's eye across the room. She nodded, slipping away to rig a small camera behind a bookshelf in Samuel's office, its lens hidden in the shadows. Upstairs, Lily drew in her sketchbook, her crayons scratching softly. She hadn't mentioned the voice again, but her drawings, dark swirls around a stick figure girl, told Lena enough. The girl was scared, and Lena's resolve hardened. She checked on Lily, tucking a blanket around her. "Sleep tight, sweetheart," she whispered, her hand lingering on the girl's shoulder. Lily's small smile was a flicker of trust, one Lena vowed to protect. Midnight came, and the mansion held its breath. Lena watched from the servants' quarters, a laptop open to the camera feed. The screen glowed, showing Samuel's office, the folder glowing like a beacon on his desk. At 12:47 a.m., the door creaked open. Samuel slipped in, his face gaunt, his hands trembling as he glanced around. He hesitated, staring at the folder, then snatched it, stuffing it into his coat. He pulled out the burner phone, typing a quick message. Lena's screen captured every move, her heart steady but her eyes fierce. Jack, awake in his study, watched the same feed on his phone, his knuckles white. "Got you," he muttered, his voice a mix of triumph and betrayal. Samuel's actions confirmed Lena's suspicions, but the butler wasn't the mastermind. Leo was pulling the strings, and this footage was the noose. The next morning, Lena served breakfast, her demeanor unchanged despite the night's victory. Samuel was absent, his duties covered by another staff member. Jack caught her in the hall, his voice low. "It worked. We've got him on tape, but we need Fisher to make the next move." Lena nodded, her notebook updated. August 9th, 12:47 a.m. Finch took fake folder, sent message via burner phone. Camera feed secured. "Push Leo harder," she said. "Make him think you're cracking. He'll get sloppy." Jack's eyes narrowed, a grim smile forming. "You're wasted on housework, Lena." He paused, then added, "Thank you, for Lily, for this." She met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "I'm not doing this for thanks, Mr. Sullivan. I'm doing it for her." She turned, her steps silent, but her mind was loud with plans. Leo would come tomorrow, expecting a broken man. Instead, he'd face a trap. The mansion's clocks ticked on, their rhythm a countdown. Lena's eyes, sharp as ever, watched the shadows shift. She wasn't just a maid, she was a hunter now, and the prey was closer than it knew. The Sullivan Mansion's opulence felt like a cage, its gleaming surfaces hiding a storm ready to break. Lena Jones moved through the breakfast service with her usual quiet grace, but her mind was a blade, sharpened by last night's victory. The camera footage of Samuel Finch stealing the fake merger folder was locked in Jack's safe, a weapon waiting to be wielded. Her notebook tucked in her apron held the latest entry. August 9th, 7:03 a.m., Finch confirmed as Fisher's pawn, awaiting next move. She poured coffee, her eyes flicking to Jack, who sat at the dining table, his face a mask of controlled strain. Jack sipped his coffee, his thoughts churning. The footage was damning, but Samuel wasn't the mastermind. Leo Fisher was. Jack had played the part of a crumbling man, his calls to Leo laced with feigned panic. But now he needed to strike. Lena's plan had worked flawlessly, and her quiet resolve anchored him. He caught her glance, a silent signal they were ready for the next step. After breakfast, Lena cleared the plates, her ears catching Samuel's heavy footsteps in the hall. The butler's face was ashen, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. She followed him to the pantry, her voice low. "Mr. Sullivan wants to see you in his study, Samuel. Now." Her tone was neutral, but her gaze held a weight that made him flinch. In the study, Jack stood by the window, the morning light casting sharp shadows across his face. Lena stood by the door, her presence unobtrusive but unyielding. Samuel entered, his hands clasped tightly, his voice barely a whisper. "You wanted me, sir?" Jack turned, his eyes hard but not cruel. "Sit, Samuel. We need to talk." He gestured to a chair, his tone calm but laced with steel. "I know about the folder. I know about Leo." Samuel's face crumpled, his hands shaking. "Mr. Sullivan, I didn't want to." His voice broke, and he sank into the chair, his shoulders heaving. Lena stepped closer, her expression softening but her eyes sharp, watching every twitch. "Tell me everything," Jack said, leaning forward. "Not because I'm angry, Samuel, because I want to help you. But you have to be honest." Samuel's gaze darted between Jack and Lena, fear warring with resignation. "It's Fisher," he choked out. "He found out about my debt. Years ago, I borrowed to save my sister's house. He threatened to ruin her, to tell you I'd betrayed you. He made me tamper with emails, cameras. He told me to scare Lily, to make you doubt yourself." His voice cracked, tears welling. "I didn't want to hurt her, sir. I swear." Lena's jaw tightened, her mind flashing to Lily's frightened eyes, the whispered voice by the pool. She spoke, her voice steady but cold. "You sent those texts about Lily. You let him use her." It wasn't a question, but a blade, cutting through his excuses. Samuel nodded, his head bowed. "I had no choice. He'd destroy my family." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the burner phone, its screen cracked. "Everything's here. Texts, calls. It's all him." Jack took the phone, his fingers brushing the cold plastic. "You're giving me this because you know it's right, Samuel. We'll protect you, but you're done hiding." His voice was firm, a promise wrapped in resolve. Samuel nodded, tears falling, his confession a weight lifted, but a wound still raw. As Samuel left, Lena added to her notebook. August 9th, 10:22 a.m., Finch confesses. "Burner phone secured, implicates Fisher." She looked at Jack. "Leo's coming this afternoon. He'll push you harder now." Jack nodded, his eyes dark. "Then we push back." Hours later, Leo Fisher strode into the mansion, his smile sharp as a razor. He found Lena in the library, dusting shelves, her presence seemingly invisible. "Miss Jones," he said, his voice smooth. "A word." He closed the door, his eyes glinting with calculation. From his coat, he produced a check, the amount enough to buy a small house. "You see a lot, don't you? This is for your silence. Take it, and we're square." Lena set her cloth down, her gaze locking onto his. She took the check, studying it, then slid it back across the table, her voice low and unyielding. "Your biggest mistake wasn't underestimating Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Fisher. It was underestimating me." Her words were a quiet thunder, her eyes burning with defiance. Leo's smile faltered, a crack in his armor. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss. You're playing a dangerous game, Maid. And you're losing it, Lena replied, her tone ice cold. She turned, resuming her dusting, dismissing him without a glance. Leo stormed out, his composure fraying, unaware that Lena's notebook now held another entry. August 9th, 2:17 p.m. Fisher attempts bribe, $250,000. Confidence slipping. Upstairs, Lily played with her dolls, her small voice humming a tune. Lena checked on her heart easing at the girl's tentative smile. "You're safe, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing a curl from Lily's face. But the mansion's shadows loomed, and Lena knew the final act was near. Jack, in his study, reviewed the burner phone's texts, each one a nail in Leo's coffin. He looked at the merger folder, its lies now a weapon. Lena's words echoed. Leo was slipping, and they had him. The mansion's clocks ticked louder, counting down to the reckoning. Lena, ever watchful, was ready to see it through. The Sullivan mansion stood like a fortress under siege, its marble halls taut with anticipation. Lena Jones polished a vase in the foyer, her movements deliberate, but her eyes tracked every shadow. The burner phone, Samuel's confession, and Leo Fisher's failed bribe were locked in Jack's safe, a powder keg ready to ignite. Her notebook, hidden in her apron, bore a fresh entry. August 9th, 6:03 p.m. Fisher rattled after bribe attempt. Board meeting set for tonight. The air felt charged, as if the mansion itself awaited the storm's breaking. Jack Sullivan sat in his study, his fingers drumming on the desk. The board meeting, scheduled in hours, was his stage. He'd spent the morning reviewing the evidence. Lena's meticulous notes, the burner phone's texts, the footage of Samuel stealing the fake folder. Leo thought he'd broken him, but Jack was ready to turn the tables. Lena's quiet strength had steadied him, her plan a lifeline in the chaos. Lena slipped into the study, a tray of water in hand. "Everything's set, Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice low, steady. "The projector's loaded with the footage. Samuel's ready to speak." Her eyes met his, a silent vow. They'd end this tonight. Jack nodded, his jaw tight. "You've done more than I could have asked, Lena. When this is over, we'll talk about your place here." His tone carried a rare warmth, a crack in his guarded exterior. Lena's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Let's finish this first." She left, her steps silent, but her mind blazed with focus. Leo was coming, expecting a broken man. He'd find a reckoning instead. By evening, the boardroom buzzed with tension, its long mahogany table ringed by executives in tailored suits. Leo Fisher sat at one end, his smile polished but his eyes sharp, scanning Jack for weakness. Samuel stood by the door, his face pale but resolute, his confession a weight he was ready to shed. Lena lingered in the hall, her presence unnoticed, her notebook ready for one final entry. Jack stood, his voice steady but heavy. "Thank you for coming on short notice. I've been struggling. Mistakes, errors, doubts about my leadership." He paused, letting the words hang, watching Leo's smirk widen. "I thought about stepping down." A murmur rippled through the room. Leo leaned forward, his voice smooth. "Jack, you've carried this company far. Maybe it's time to rest." His tone dripped with false sympathy, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Jack's gaze hardened. "But then I found something." He clicked a remote, and the projector hummed to life. The screen lit up with Lena's notebook, its pages scanned and magnified. Dates, times, anomalies, meticulously logged. 17 glitches in a month. Cameras tampered, emails altered, my daughter targeted. His voice rose, edged with steel. "This wasn't an accident." The room fell silent. Leo's smile froze as the screen shifted to footage of Samuel in his office, stealing the fake folder. Then the burner phone's texts, stark and damning. "Get the merger files. Keep the girl scared." Gasps echoed. Samuel stepped forward, his voice trembling but clear. "It was Fisher. He blackmailed me. My sister's debt, my family's future. I had no choice." Leo shot to his feet, his face flushed. "This is absurd. You're framing me, Jack." His voice cracked, his composure slipping like sand through his fingers. Jack didn't flinch. "You thought I was weak, Leo. You thought you could break me, scare my daughter, steal my company." He played the final piece. A recorded call from Samuel's burner phone. Leo's voice clear. Push him harder. He's cracking. The boardroom erupted in whispers, eyes turning to Leo, who stood rigid, cornered. Security, Jack said, his voice calm but final. Two guards entered, their steps heavy. Leo's eyes darted, seeking an escape, but there was none. You're done, Jack said, as the guards took Leo's arms, leading him out. His protests echoed down the hall, fading into silence. The board sat stunned, their faces a mix of shock and respect. Jack turned to the door, where Lena stood, her presence quiet but undeniable. This is Lena Jones, he said, his voice carrying across the room. Without her mind, her courage, we'd all be in the dark. She saw what no one else did. Heads turned, eyes widening at the maid in the doorway. Lena met their gazes, her expression steady, her strength unspoken but radiant. She didn't need their applause. She'd done this for Lily, for truth. Jack caught her eye, a nod of gratitude passing between them. As the board dispersed, Jack lingered, his shoulders lighter. You changed everything, Lena, he said softly. I owe you more than I can say. Lena shook her head, her voice firm. You owe Lily a father. That's enough. She turned, her notebook still in her pocket. It's work done for now. The mansion's air felt clearer, the shadows less oppressive, but Lena knew the scars of this fight would linger, and she'd watch for them, always. Upstairs, Lily slept, her dreams free of whispers, her rabbit tucked close. The mansion's clocks ticked softly, their rhythm steady at last. Lena's eyes, ever vigilant, saw the dawn breaking outside, a promise of peace, but she'd never stop watching. The Sullivan Mansion, once a labyrinth of cold marble and hidden threats, now hummed with a tentative warmth, its halls softened by the morning light. Lena Jones moved through the kitchen, preparing Lily's favorite blueberry muffins, her hands steady but her heart lighter. The boardroom showdown had stripped away the shadows, exposing Leo Fisher's treachery. He was gone, facing charges that would keep him caged for years. Samuel Finch, too, had stepped into the light, his confession earning him leniency and a chance to rebuild. Lena's notebook rested in her apron, its pages quiet for the first time in weeks. The final entry simple. August 10th, 6:14 a.m. Fisher arrested. Mansion secure. Jack Sullivan sat at the dining table, his usual stack of papers replaced by a single photo frame. Lily, smiling at last year's birthday party. The weight of his empire still pressed on him, but the fight to save it had shifted his gaze. He looked up as Lena entered, setting the muffins down. Lily's still asleep, she said, her voice soft but warm. She had a good night. Jack nodded, his eyes tracing the lines of exhaustion on Lena's face, now softened by a rare ease. You gave her that, he said, his voice low. You gave us both a chance to start over. He paused, leaning forward. Lena, I've been thinking. You're wasted on housework. I want you in the company, head of security, operations, whatever you choose. Name your role. Lena's hand stilled on the tray, her dark eyes meeting his. The offer was generous, a door to a world she'd never sought. She thought of her father, his watchmaker's tools, his lessons about seeing the unseen. She'd come here to work, to survive, not to climb. But this house, this family, had become more. I'm not built for boardrooms, Mr. Sullivan, she said, her tone firm but kind. But I'll stay, manage the household, keep things steady, for Lily, for you. Jack's brow furrowed, but a smile broke through. You're stubborn as hell, Lena Jones. But I respect it. You're family now, whether you like it or not. His words carried a weight, a promise beyond contracts or paychecks. Lena nodded, a flicker of warmth in her chest. Family sounds good, she said, turning to clear the table. Her role was no longer just a maid's. She was a guardian, a friend, a quiet force holding this home together. Outside, the garden bloomed under the August sun, its roses vivid against the green. Lily ran through the grass, her laughter a melody that had been missing too long. Jack followed, his suit jacket discarded, his steps lighter than they'd been in years. Lena joined them, a basket of gardening tools in hand. Look, Lily, she said, kneeling beside a rose bush. You pinch the dead petals like this, gentle but sure. It helps the flower grow stronger. Lily mimicked her, her small fingers careful, her eyes bright with focus. Like you helped us? She asked, her voice soft but clear. Lena's breath caught, her hand pausing on a stem. She met Lily's gaze, seeing trust, not fear. Something like that, she said, her smile soft but real. Jack watched, his heart swelling. He'd built an empire of steel and numbers. But this, his daughter's laughter, Lena's quiet strength, was his true wealth. They worked together, the sun warming their backs, the garden alive with color and sound. Lily planted a seedling, her hands clumsy but determined, while Lena guided her, her voice a steady hum. Jack knelt beside them, his fingers in the soil, a man remade by loss and redemption. You're good at this, Lena, he said, glancing at her. Teaching her. Teaching me. Lena shrugged, brushing dirt from her hands. It's just watching, Mr. Sullivan, seeing what needs fixing. Her eyes held his, a shared understanding passing between them. The mansion, once a cold machine, was a home again, its gears aligned by trust. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the estate, Lily ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, this time safely on the grass. Jack and Lena stood, watching her, the silence between them comfortable, not heavy. Call me Jack, he said, his voice quiet but firm. No more, Mr. Sullivan. Lena nodded, a small smile breaking through. All right, Jack. The name felt new, a bridge built over weeks of secrets and battles. The mansion's clocks ticked softly, their rhythm no longer a warning, but a pulse of life. Samuel, starting anew in a quieter role, sent a letter of thanks, his words simple but sincere. Lena tucked it away, her notebook closed for now. She'd always watch, always see, but today she let herself feel the warmth of this moment, this family she'd helped save. Lily called out, waving a flower she'd picked. For you, Lena, she shouted, running back. Lena took it, her fingers brushing the petals, her heart full. The Sullivan mansion stood behind them, no longer a fortress of secrets, but a home reborn in light. And so the Sullivan mansion finds its peace, its shadows banished by Lena's unwavering gaze and Jack's rediscovered heart. What did you think of the silent observer? Did Lena's quiet strength steal your breath, or was it Jack's redemption that hit home? Maybe Lily's courage touched you most. Share your thoughts, your favorite moments, or where you're listening from. Day or night, near or far. Your voice keeps this story alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey through secrets and salvation. We're grateful for every second you've spent with us. Stay tuned for more tales that grip the soul. Until next time, keep watching the shadows. Who knows what truths you'll uncover? The reward for 8 years of devotion was a public execution. Nurse Emily Harper had been the eyes and the anchor for Daniel Whitaker, the brilliant tech mogul who lost his sight after a devastating accident. She had sacrificed her youth to become his lifeline. But in the cold, sterile fortress of the Whitaker Innovations boardroom, before a jury of silent, tailored suits, her loyalty wasn't a virtue, it was a liability. All the power in the room rested with one person. Victoria, Daniel's sister, whose manicured finger was now aimed at her like a weapon. The venomous accusation hung in the air, poised to strike, and Emily's world was about to shatter with a single sentence. You're nothing but a gold-digging nurse. Victoria Whitaker's voice sliced through the boardroom like a guillotine. Her manicured finger jabbed toward Emily Harper, who stood rigid at the edge of the polished mahogany table in Whitaker Innovations' Silicon Valley headquarters. The accusation hung in the air, venomous and deliberate, as the 12 board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Emily's jaw clenched, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the folder of Daniel Whitaker's medical reports. She'd faced condescension before, but this was a public execution. Victoria, Daniel's older sister and the company's CFO, paced the room, her heels clicking like gunfire. You think you can worm your way into my brother's life, his company, his fortune? You're a caregiver, Emily, a nobody from Pittsburgh's slums. Stay in your lane. Her words dripped with disdain, each syllable a calculated strike to strip Emily of her dignity. The boardroom, usually a fortress of corporate strategy, had become a coliseum, and Emily was the gladiator without a sword. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Victoria cut her off. Don't speak. You've been meddling in Daniel's decisions, whispering in his ear, acting like you belong here. You don't. The board members, men and women in tailored suits, their faces a mix of unease and agreement, remained silent, their loyalty to Victoria's influence palpable. Emily's heart pounded, her pulse a drumbeat of defiance, but she held her ground. She'd spent 8 years caring for Daniel, the blind tech mogul who'd built this empire, not just as his nurse, but as his confidant, his anchor. And now, this. You're proposing we fire her? Margaret Blackwell, a board member with a flicker of sympathy in her eyes, ventured cautiously. Victoria whirled, her gaze icy. Exactly, she's a liability. Daniel's too dependent on her, and it's clouding his judgment. We need a professional, not some working-class opportunist. The word opportunist landed like a slap, and Emily's fingers twitched, itching to hurl the folder at Victoria's smug face. But she didn't. Not yet. The injustice burned. Emily had sacrificed her youth, her social life, her dreams, to care for Daniel after the lab explosion that stole his sight. She'd memorized his needs, from the exact temperature of his coffee to the rhythm of his breathing during sleepless nights. She'd taught herself coding basics to help him navigate his work, all while sending her salary home to her mother and sister in Pittsburgh. And now Victoria was painting her as a predator, leveraging Emily's lack of status to dismantle her life. Daniel, trust me, Emily said, her voice low but steady, cutting through Victoria's tirade. The room stilled. Victoria's lips curled into a sneer. Trust? You're paid to change his bandages, not play CEO. Don't delude yourself. The board members exchanged glances, some nodding faintly, their silence a betrayal. Emily's chest tightened, not with tears, but with a fury that made her teeth ache. She wanted to scream that she'd been the one keeping Daniel grounded, keeping his genius alive while Victoria schemed behind his back. But words wouldn't sway this crowd. Not now. Victoria leaned forward, her voice a hiss. You're done here, Emily. Pack your things. We'll find someone with actual credentials. The dismissal was final, a gavel strike in a kangaroo court. Emily's pulse roared in her ears, but she straightened her spine, refusing to crumble. She'd faced worse, growing up in a neighborhood where hope was a luxury, burying her father at 16, scraping by to put her sister through college. This was just another fight. The boardroom door loomed ahead, a portal to her uncertain future. Emily's hand tightened on the folder, her only shield. She'd leave, but not without a mark. Victoria's smug certainty would crack. Emily would make sure of it. As she stepped toward the door, her mind raced with the weight of 8 years, the secrets she and Daniel shared, and a faint glimmer of something new. A spark of defiance that would burn brighter than Victoria could ever imagine. Emily's hand froze on the boardroom door, her knuckles still white from clutching the folder of Daniel's medical reports. Victoria's venomous words, "Pack your things," echoed in her skull, each syllable a dagger aimed at her heart. The board members' silence screamed louder than any insult, their averted gazes branding her an outsider. But Emily Harper didn't break. Not here, not now. Her jaw locked tight, teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. She turned, facing Victoria, whose smirk radiated triumph, a queen certain of her checkmate. "You think you've won," Emily said, her voice a low, steady blade cutting through the room's tension. "You think you can erase 8 years of my life with a snap of your fingers. But you'll see, Victoria. Loyalty isn't bought with money or status. It's earned through sacrifice. And I've sacrificed more than you'll ever understand." Her words landed like a prophecy, heavy with unspoken promises of reckoning. The board members shifted, Margaret Blackwell's eyes widening slightly, but Victoria's sneer didn't waver. "Don't lecture me about sacrifice," Victoria snapped, stepping closer, her heels stabbing the floor. "You're a hired hand, nothing more. Save your speeches for the unemployment line." Emily's pulse surged, her fists itching to lash out, but she forced her hands to stay still. She wouldn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her crack. Instead, she let her silence speak, a silence so potent it seemed to suck the air from the room. Her eyes locked onto Victoria's, unyielding, a mirror reflecting the CFO's cruelty back at her. Emily turned again, her movements deliberate, each step a defiance of the dismissal. She pushed open the heavy mahogany door, the Whitaker Innovations logo glaring at her like a mocking emblem of her exclusion. But as she stepped into the hallway, her heart pounded with resolve. She wouldn't slink away like a beaten dog. She'd go to Daniel, ensure his needs were met, as she'd done every day for 8 years. Not because it was her job, but because it was her purpose. In Daniel's office, she set the folder down with a quiet thud, her fingers trembling, not with fear, but with a fire that refused to die. She checked his schedule, adjusted his medication tray, and left a note in Braille. "I'm here if you need me." It was more than a message. It was a vow. As she exited the building, the Silicon Valley sun glared down, but Emily's mind was already racing ahead. Victoria thought she'd crushed her, but this was only the beginning. Emily's silence wasn't surrender. It was a storm gathering strength, ready to unleash a truth that would shake the foundations of Whitaker Innovations. Victoria Whitaker sat alone in her corner office, the Silicon Valley skyline sprawling beyond the glass walls, a kingdom she thought she'd secured. Her fingers tapped the desk, the echo of Emily's parting words. Loyalty isn't bought with money or status. Cutting deeper than she'd admit. Her smirk from the boardroom had faded, replaced by a tightness in her chest, a splinter of doubt wedged into her certainty. She'd won, hadn't she? Emily was gone, her influence over Daniel severed. Yet the victory felt hollow, like a deal closed on shaky terms. She opened her laptop, intent on drafting a memo to justify Emily's dismissal, when an email from Daniel caught her eye. Sent 2 years ago, buried in an archive folder, it was titled Emily Harper, Indispensable. Her breath hitched as she clicked it open. Emily's not just my nurse, Daniel had written to the board. She's my eyes, my strategist, my reason for pushing forward. Her judgment is sharper than most of you combined. The words stung, each one a rebuke to Victoria's accusations. Her fingers froze on the keyboard, her pulse quickening as guilt clawed its way up her spine. Had she misjudged Emily so completely? She slammed the laptop shut, her nails biting into her palms. She's just a nurse, she muttered, but the words lacked conviction, crumbling under the weight of Daniel's praise. Emily had been at his side through every crisis, every sleepless night, while Victoria had been too busy plotting to notice. The realization twisted like a knife, her confidence unraveling. She'd called Emily an opportunist, but what if she was the one blinded by prejudice, seeing only a working-class woman instead of the pillar Daniel relied on? As she stood, pacing to shake off the unease, her eyes caught a notification on her computer. A flagged file on Daniel's private server, labeled Lab Incident Report Restricted. Curiosity battled her guilt. She clicked, but the file was encrypted, its contents locked behind a password she didn't know. A single line in the metadata chilled her. Preliminary findings suggest equipment failure was preventable. Preventable? The lab explosion that blinded Daniel had been ruled an accident, a tragedy no one could have foreseen. Yet this file hinted at something darker, something hidden. Victoria's heart pounded, her mind racing. Had Emily known about this? Was that why she'd stayed so loyal, guarding secrets Victoria couldn't access? The thought gnawed at her, her earlier triumph now a shadow. She'd humiliated Emily, driven her out, but this file and Daniel's words suggested she'd underestimated the nurse's role in ways that could unravel her carefully laid plans. Her fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to call Emily back, to demand answers, but pride held her back. Instead, she stared at the locked file, its mystery a silent accusation. The office felt smaller now, the walls closing in as doubt replaced her smug certainty. Emily's prophetic silence in the boardroom echoed louder than ever, a warning that Victoria's actions had set something in motion, something she couldn't control. Outside, the Silicon Valley lights flickered, but all Victoria saw was the shadow of her mistake, growing larger with every unanswered question. You think you can erase my daughter's 8 years with a sneer? Emily's mother, Clara Harper, stood in the doorway of their cramped Pittsburgh apartment, her voice a whip crack that stopped Victoria Whitaker dead in her tracks. The CFO's tailored coat looked absurdly out of place against the peeling paint and faded linoleum of the working-class home. Clara's eyes, sharp as steel, bore into Victoria, her gnarled hands gripping the doorframe like she might slam it shut. Victoria's polished confidence faltered, her lips parting, but no words came. She'd come to make amends, but Clara's fury was a wall she hadn't expected. I, I came to apologize, Victoria stammered, her voice betraying a crack of unease. Clara's laugh was a harsh bark. Apologize? You humiliated my Emily in front of your fancy board, calling her a gold digger for caring for your brother. You don't get to waltz in here and fix that with words. Victoria's fingers tightened around her purse, her knuckles whitening as the sting of Clara's rebuke hit harder than she'd braced for. The email from Daniel, praising Emily's indispensability, burned in her memory, a splinter of guilt that had driven her across the country to this doorstep. She'd underestimated Emily, and now Clara's defiance mirrored her daughter's, a mirror held up to Victoria's arrogance. Where is she? Victoria pressed, her voice sharper now, trying to reclaim control. Clara's eyes narrowed. Working. At the hospital, where real people need her. Not your brother's mansion, where you think she's beneath you. The accusation landed like a punch, and Victoria's chest tightened, her breath hitching. She'd expected Emily to be broken, waiting for rescue, not thriving elsewhere. Clara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You want her back? Prove you're worth her time. Victoria's pulse raced as she left the apartment, Clara's words searing her like a brand. She drove through Pittsburgh's gritty streets, her sleek rental car a stark contrast to the rusted pickups and weathered row houses. At Allegheny General Hospital, she found Emily's name on the staff roster, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. She'd come to right a wrong, but the weight of her mistake was heavier than she'd imagined. Emily wasn't just a nurse, she was a lifeline, and Victoria had cut it without a second thought. Inside the hospital, Victoria navigated the fluorescent-lit corridors, her heels clicking against the linoleum, drawing stares from overworked nurses. She spotted Emily in a bustling ward, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift, her hands steady as she adjusted an IV for an elderly patient. Emily's face was a mask of focus, but her eyes held a fire that Victoria hadn't noticed in the boardroom. She was no victim. She was a force moving with purpose, her every action a rebuke to Victoria's assumptions. Victoria's throat tightened, her earlier certainty crumbling. How had she misread this woman so completely? Emily, Victoria called, her voice cutting through the ward's hum. Emily turned, her expression hardening as she saw Victoria. She didn't speak, just raised an eyebrow, her silence a challenge. Victoria's fingers twitched, itching to retreat, but she forced herself forward. I was wrong, she said, the words tasting like ash. I shouldn't have said those things in the boardroom. I need you to come back. Daniel needs you. Emily's jaw clenched, her hands pausing on the IV stand. You think an apology undoes what you did? You called me a leech in front of everyone who matters to him. Victoria flinched, her nails digging into her palms. I know. I saw Daniel's email. He trusts you more than anyone. I misjudged you. Emily's eyes flickered, a storm of anger and hurt swirling within them. You misjudged me because I'm not like you. I don't have your money, your name. But I've kept Daniel alive, kept his mind sharp, for 8 years. You don't get to decide my worth. The words hit like a slap, and Victoria's face burned, her pride warring with the guilt that had driven her here. Emily turned back to her patient, her movements precise but tense, as if holding back a tidal wave of rage. If Daniel wants me back, he'll ask me himself, she said, her voice low, final. Victoria stood frozen, her heart hammering. She'd expected tears, pleading, not this unyielding strength. As Emily walked away, her scrubs swishing with purpose, Victoria's gaze fell on a hospital bulletin board. A faded flyer mentioned a Whitaker Innovations grant for vision research, signed by Daniel. It was a reminder of his brilliance and Emily's role in preserving it. Victoria's guilt deepened, a chasm she couldn't bridge alone. She'd humiliated Emily, but the nurse's absence was a wound that would bleed through Daniel's empire and Victoria's conscience until she made this right. As she stepped into the hospital's parking lot, the weight of her mission pressed harder. Emily wasn't just a caregiver. She was a cornerstone, and Victoria had tried to tear her down. The encrypted file from Daniel's server, lab incident report, flashed in her mind, its mystery a nagging shadow. Something bigger was at play, and Emily might hold the key. Victoria's resolve hardened, her heels digging into the asphalt as she vowed to bring Emily back. Not just for Daniel, but to face the truth she'd ignored for too long. Emily Harper's sneakers squeaked against the hospital linoleum as she knelt beside a young girl's bed, her hands steady as she adjusted the child's oxygen mask. The ward at Allegheny General buzzed with the chaos of a late-night shift, beeping monitors, hurried footsteps. But Emily was a calm anchor, her focus unbreakable. Her scrubs clung to her sweat-dampened back, the weight of a 12-hour shift pressing down, but her eyes burned with purpose. Victoria's humiliation in the boardroom still stung, a bruise on her pride. But here, in this world of patience and pain, Emily was unshakable. She wasn't just a nurse. She was a lifeline, and no one, not even a Whitaker, could take that from her. "Miss Emily, will I see my mom's face again?" The girl, Lily, whispered, her voice fragile, her eyes clouded by cataracts. Emily's chest tightened, her fingers pausing on the mask. She forced a smile, her voice soft but firm. "We're fighting for that, sweetheart. Dr. Nguyen's working hard, and I'm right here with you." Lily's small hand gripped hers, and Emily squeezed back, her resolve hardening. This was why she'd endured 8 years of caring for Daniel Whitaker, why she'd studied late into the night to understand his blindness, why she'd pushed him through secret stem cell therapy trials. It wasn't just for him. It was for kids like Lily, for anyone who needed hope when the world turned dark. She stood, her knees cracking, and caught her reflection in a nearby monitor. Her face was drawn, her braid fraying, but her eyes held a fire that Victoria's words couldn't extinguish. She'd been Daniel's eyes for 8 years, reading his emails, guiding his hand through contracts, whispering encouragement when despair threatened to swallow him. And now in secret, she'd been his partner in a daring experiment, a stem cell treatment that had begun to spark faint glimmers in his sight. Shadows, light, the outline of her face. He described it to her last week, his voice trembling with awe. She'd kept it hidden, not just from Victoria, but from the world, protecting his hope from the skeptics who'd crushed it before. At the nurse's station, her coworker Jamal handed her a lukewarm coffee. "You're a machine, Harper," he said, his tone half admiring, half concerned. "You've been here since dawn, and you're still going. What's driving you?" Emily's lips twitched, a half smile masking the storm inside. "Someone's got to keep the lights on for my sister's college tuition," she said, deflecting. But her mind flashed to Daniel, to the way his hand had grazed hers during their last therapy session, his voice low as he said, "You make me believe I can see again." That moment had shifted something in her, a spark she didn't dare name, but it fueled her now, pushing her through exhaustion. She glanced at Lily's chart, her fingers tracing the notes on vision therapy. Her own studies, dog-eared medical journals, late-night webinars, had taught her more than her nursing degree ever could. She'd learned about neuroplasticity, about the brain's ability to rewire itself, and applied it to Daniel's care. Every small victory, his ability to sense light, to track movement, felt like her own. But Victoria's accusation had cut deep, branding her a schemer when all she'd done was believe in a man everyone else had written off. Her jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she shoved the anger down. She wouldn't let Victoria's cruelty define her. As she prepared to check on another patient, Jamal nudged her. "You heard about the Whitaker grant? Vision research, big money. Your guy's name's on it." Emily's heart skipped. Daniel's grant, one she'd helped him draft, was funding trials like the one saving him. It was proof of his brilliance, Proof she'd been right to fight for him. Her fingers tightened around the coffee cup, her resolve steeling. She wasn't done. Not with Daniel, not with herself. Victoria could try to tear her down, but Emily Harper was building something bigger, something that would outlast the CFO's venom. She stepped back into the ward, her sneakers steady, her heart a furnace of determination. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, Daniel was waiting, and she'd be damned if she let him face his darkness alone. As she moved to Lily's side, checking her chart with a fierce focus, a single thought burned bright. She'd bring light back to those who needed it most, starting with the man who'd changed her world. "You don't get to walk in here and erase what you did." Emily Harper's voice cut through the hospital ward's hum, sharp as a scalpel, as she faced Victoria Whitaker. Her hands gripped a patient chart, knuckles white, her eyes blazing with a fury that had simmered since the boardroom humiliation. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows, but Emily stood unyieldingly, her scrubs wrinkled from a relentless shift at Allegheny General. Victoria, in her pristine Chanel coat, looked like an intruder in this world of grit and grace, her earlier confidence now a fragile mask. "I'm here to make this right," Victoria said, her voice tight, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. The apology she'd rehearsed in her head felt flimsy now, dwarfed by Emily's righteous anger. She crossed the country, driven by the sting of Daniel's email and the cryptic lab incident report file. But Clara Harper's rebuke and Emily's strength had rattled her. "I was wrong to call you a gold digger. I saw Daniel's email. You're vital to him." The admission burned her throat, each word a surrender of her pride. Emily's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she set the chart down with a deliberate thud. "Vital? You didn't think so when you tore me apart in front of your board. You called me a leech, Victoria. You think a few words fix that?" Her voice was low, a controlled storm, each syllable slicing through Victoria's defenses. The ward's chaos, nurses rushing, monitors beeping, faded as Emily stepped closer, her presence commanding. "I've carried Daniel through 8 years of darkness. I've studied his condition, learned his world, and kept him fighting. You don't get to waltz in and claim you understand." Victoria's chest tightened, her nails digging into her palms. "I know I misjudged you," she said, her voice cracking. "Daniel's floundering without you. The board is questioning his leadership, and I made it worse." Her eyes flickered with something raw, guilt, maybe fear. "Come back, please. He needs you." Emily's lips twitched, a bitter half-smile. "You don't get to decide what Daniel needs. He does." She turned, ready to walk away, her sneakers poised to carry her back to her patients, to the life she'd reclaim. But Victoria grabbed her arm, her grip desperate. "Wait, I'll make it right with the board. I'll admit I was wrong publicly. Just help him." Emily froze, Victoria's touch a spark that reignited her anger. She yanked her arm free, her eyes narrowing. "You want me back? Prove it. Support Daniel's leadership, no more games? And find out what really happened in that lab explosion? Something's not right, and I think you know it." Her words were a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at Victoria's feet. Victoria's breath caught, the mention of the explosion hitting like a punch. The encrypted file flashed in her mind, its ominous hint that the incident was preventable. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll look into it, I swear." Emily's gaze held hers, searching for sincerity, then softened slightly, a flicker of trust breaking through her fury. "Fine. I'll come back when Daniel asks. Not before." Her tone was final, a line drawn in the sand. As Emily turned to check on a patient, her hand brushed against a small box in her pocket. Daniel's belongings, left behind when she'd cleared out her staff quarters. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a USB drive, its label faded but legible. Whitaker Lab Backup, 2017. Her heart skipped, her pulse racing as she realized it might hold answers about the explosion that blinded Daniel. She slipped it back into her pocket, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just about her and Daniel. It was about truth, about justice. Victoria watched, her hands shaking as she clutched her purse. Emily's demand to investigate the explosion echoed the mystery of the encrypted file, and the weight of her own complicity pressed harder. She'd come to apologize, but now she was entangled in something bigger, something that could unravel her family's empire. "I'll do it," she said, more to herself than Emily, her voice firming with purpose. "I'll find out what happened." Emily didn't respond. Her focus was back on her patient, but her silence carried a weight that Victoria felt in her bones. As Victoria turned to leave, her heels clicking against the linoleum, she knew this was only the beginning. The USB drive in Emily's pocket was a ticking bomb, its secrets waiting to detonate. And Victoria, for the first time, feared she wasn't ready for the fallout. She stepped into the hospital corridor, her shadow stretching long, a reminder that the truth, whatever it was, would demand a reckoning. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Harold Grayson's voice was a low growl, his wiry frame looming over Emily Harper in the dim corridor of Whitaker Innovations' legal department. His eyes, sharp and cold as a hawk's, pinned her in place, his thin lips curling into a sneer. Emily's pulse hammered, her fingers tightening around the USB drive in her pocket, the one labeled Whitaker Lab Backup, 2017, she'd found among Daniel's belongings. She'd come to the office to retrieve Daniel's latest medical files, but Harold, the Whitaker family's longtime lawyer, had cornered her like a predator scenting blood. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Harold snapped, stepping closer, his polished shoes clicking menacingly on the tile. "Snooping around, whispering in Daniel's ear, playing hero. You're a nurse, not a detective. Stay out of things that don't concern you." Emily's jaw locked, her teeth grinding as she fought the urge to shove past him. She'd faced Victoria's venom, but Harold's threat was different. Raw, dangerous, like a blade pressed to her throat. Her heart pounded, but she stood her ground, her sneakers rooted to the floor. "I'm here for Daniel's files," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his tirade. "Not your secrets." Harold's eyes narrowed, his hands shooting out to grab her wrist. "Secrets? You have no idea what you're stirring up." His grip was iron, his fingers digging into her skin, sending a jolt of pain up her arm. Emily yanked free, her chest heaving, fury blazing in her eyes. "Let go of me, or I'll scream this place down." Her words were a whip, sharp and unyielding, but Harold's smirk only deepened, a predator unfazed by prey. "You scream and I'll make sure you lose everything," he hissed, leaning in so close she could smell his stale cologne. "Your job, your reputation, your precious little family in Pittsburgh. I know about your sister's tuition, your mother's debts. One word from me, and it's gone." The threat landed like a punch, Emily's breath catching as her mind flashed to her sister. Lily's college dreams, her mother's fragile health. Harold knew too much. His words were a calculated strike at her vulnerabilities. Her fingers twitched around the USB drive, its weight a silent reminder of the truth she was chasing. Victoria appeared at the corridor's end, her heels clicking as she froze, catching the tail end of Harold's threat. "Harold, what's going on?" she demanded, her voice sharp but laced with unease. Harold spun, his composure slipping for a split second before his smirk returned. "Just warning our nurse not to meddle in company business," he said, his tone oily, dismissive. Victoria's eyes darted to Emily. Her guilt from their hospital confrontation still did not equal sign flicker in her gaze. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked, stepping forward, her hands clenched into fists. "I'm fine," Emily snapped, her voice a blade, her wrist still stinging from Harold's grip. "But you're hiding something, and I'm not afraid of you." Her defiance was a fire, burning through her fear, her eyes locking onto Harold's with a challenge. He chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "You're out of your depth, girl. Keep pushing, and you'll drown." He turned, striding away, his shadow long and threatening, leaving Emily's heart racing with a mix of rage and dread. Victoria's face paled, her fingers trembling as she adjusted her purse strap. "Emily, what was that about?" she asked, her voice low, uncertain. Emily's hand tightened around the USB drive, her resolve hardening. "He's scared," she said, her voice low but firm. "That means we're close to something big." Victoria's eyes widened, the encrypted file from Daniel's server flashing in her mind, a hint that the lab explosion was preventable. Emily's defiance was a spark, igniting Victoria's doubt about Harold's loyalty. Emily's sneakers squeaked as she turned to leave, her mind racing. Harold's threat wasn't just personal, it was a shield for something darker, something tied to the explosion that stole Daniel's sight. The USB drive in her pocket felt heavier, its secrets a ticking bomb. She'd faced Victoria's scorn and won. Now Harold was a new enemy, one with sharper claws. As she stepped into the elevator, her hand closed protectively over the drive, her heart a furnace of determination. Whatever Harold was hiding, she'd uncover it, no matter the cost. The doors closed, sealing her in with the weight of a truth that could shatter Whitaker Innovations and everyone in it. "You're poking a hornet's nest, Emily," Sarah Kim's voice hissed through the dim glow of her laptop screen, her fingers flying across the keyboard in her cramped Silicon Valley apartment. Emily Harper leaned over her shoulder, her pulse hammering, her hand clutching the USB drive labeled Whitaker Lab Backup 2017. Harold Grayson's threat still burned in her ears. His words, "You'll regret it." A blade pressed to her resolve, but Emily's jaw was set, her teeth grinding as she stared at the encrypted files Sarah was cracking. She wasn't backing down, not when the truth about Daniel Whitaker's blindness was within reach. "Keep going," Emily said, her voice a low command, her sneakers scuffing the hardwood as she paced. Sarah, Daniel's trusted engineer and a coding genius, shot her a wary glance. "This could get us fired, or worse." Her hands paused, hovering over the keys. Emily's eyes flashed, her fists clenching. "Worse is letting Harold bury what happened to Daniel. That explosion wasn't an accident. You saw the metadata." Sarah's lips tightened, but she nodded, diving back into the code, her fingers a blur as she bypassed the file's security. The screen flickered, revealing a partial report. "Lab equipment failure, ignored safety protocols." Emily's breath caught, her heart slamming against her ribs. The document detailed faulty wiring in the lab's experimental reactor, flagged months before the explosion that blinded Daniel. A memo buried in the file bore Harold's signature, dismissing the warnings to cut costs for Project Helix. Emily's fingers dug into her palms, her nails biting skin. "He knew," she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "He let it happen." Sarah clicked deeper, uncovering an email chain between Harold and a rival firm, Nexus Tech. "Look at this," she said, her voice tight. "Harold was funneling funds to Nexus for a side deal. They paid him to rush Project Helix. No questions asked." Emily's chest heaved, her anger a wildfire. Harold's greed had cost Daniel his sight, his life, his empire's trust. Her mind flashed to Daniel, to the way he'd squinted at her last week, his voice soft as he said, "I saw a shadow today, Emily, because of you." His vision was returning, a miracle born of their secret stem cell trials. And now she knew it was no accident that had taken it away. "We need more," Emily said, her voice steel, her hand slamming the table. "This isn't enough to nail him." Sarah's eyes widened, but she nodded, pulling up server logs from Whitaker Innovations archives. "If Harold covered this up, there'll be a trail. Financials, timestamps, something." Her fingers danced, pulling data fragments like threads from a tapestry. Emily paced, her sneakers wearing a groove in the floor, her mind racing. She'd faced Harold's threats, Victoria's scorn, but this was bigger, a conspiracy that could topple the Whitaker empire. A new file loaded, a transfer log showing $2 million moved to an offshore account under Harold's name, dated days after the explosion. Emily's heart leapt, her fingers twitching to grab the screen. "That's it," she said, her voice ablade. "He was paid to stay quiet." Sarah's hands froze, her face paling. "Emily, this is dynamite. If we take this to Daniel, Harold's done. But he's dangerous. You saw him in that corridor." Emily's jaw clenched, her teeth aching from the pressure. "I'm not afraid of him. Daniel deserves the truth." She grabbed her phone, dialing Daniel's number, her fingers trembling with urgency. "Emily!" His voice was groggy, but the hope in it, sparked by his improving vision, lit a fire in her chest. "I found something," she said, her words sharp, urgent. "The explosion. It wasn't an accident. Harold knew the equipment was faulty. He covered it up for money." Silence stretched. Then Daniel's voice, low and fierce. Get to my office, now. Emily's heart pounded, her resolve hardening. She hung up, her eyes locking onto Sarah's. Copy everything. We're taking this to him. Sarah hesitated, her fingers hovering. If Harold finds out, he'll come for us. Emily's hand shot out, gripping Sarah's shoulder. He already has. We're not stopping. Sarah nodded, her hands flying again, downloading the files to a secure drive. Emily's mind raced to Daniel, to the therapy sessions where she'd held his hand, guiding him through darkness. Last night, he traced her face with his fingers, his voice breaking. I saw your outline, Emily. It's coming back. Her throat tightened, not with fear, but with a fierce need to protect him, to expose the betrayal that had stolen his sight. As they worked, a new email popped up, an old message from Harold to an unknown recipient, dated the day of the explosion. Project Helix is secure. No one will trace it back. Emily's breath hitched, her fingers curling into fists. The puzzle was coming together, each piece a nail in Harold's coffin. But Sarah's voice cut through. There's a gap. The server logs are incomplete. Someone wiped the final transaction. Emily's heart sank, her nails digging deeper into her palms. They were close, but not close enough. She grabbed the USB drive, slipping it into her pocket, its weight a promise of justice. We'll find the rest, she said, her voice a vow. Harold's not getting away with this. Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp with determination. I'll keep digging. There's a backup server in the old lab. If it's there, I'll find it. Emily's sneakers hit the floor, her stride purposeful as she headed for the door. Daniel was waiting, and she'd bring him the truth, piece by piece. As she stepped into the night, her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Found something on the lab server. Meet me tomorrow. Emily's pulse spiked, her hand tightening around the USB drive. Victoria was on their side, or so she claimed. But Harold's shadow loomed larger now, his threats a noose tightening around them. Emily's heart thundered, her resolve a steel rod in her spine. The truth was close, but so was danger. She'd face it head on for Daniel, for herself, for the justice they both deserved. As she strode toward her car, the USB drive burned in her pocket, a beacon of secrets ready to ignite. You sold him out for a paycheck! Emily Harper's voice was a razor slicing through the tense silence of Daniel Whitaker's office. Her hands slammed the USB drive onto his desk, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. Daniel, his eyes still adjusting to the faint outlines of light from his stem cell therapy, flinched at the sound, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair. Emily's chest heaved, her pulse a war drum as she stared at the screen where Sarah Kim had just played an audio file, a damning confession from Harold Grayson, the family lawyer who'd betrayed them all. Play it again, Daniel said, his voice low, a growl of barely contained fury. Sarah, her fingers trembling, clicked the file. Harold's voice crackled through the speakers, smug and cold. The reactor was a risk, but Nexus paid well. No one will trace it. Project Helix is secure. Emily's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding until her temples throbbed. The audio, buried in the USB drive's encrypted depths, confirmed what she'd feared. Harold had known the lab equipment was faulty, ignored the warnings for a $2 million payoff from a rival firm, and let the explosion blind Daniel to protect his deal. Her fists balled, nails biting into her palms, the betrayal of fire in her veins. Daniel's face hardened, his hands shaking as he leaned forward. He did this to me, he whispered, his voice breaking. Not with weakness, but with a rage that made Emily's heart ache. She'd seen him at his lowest. Nights when despair had crushed him, when he'd whispered, I'll never see again. She'd held his hand through those moments, guiding him through darkness, and now the truth was a blade twisting in them both. Harold's greed had stolen Daniel's sight, his freedom, his trust. And Victoria, his sister, had trusted Harold, enabling the cover-up with her silence. It's worse, Sarah said, her voice tight as she pulled up another file, a contract between Harold and Nexus Tech, time-stamped days before the explosion. He didn't just ignore the warnings. He sabotaged the safety checks to rush the project. Your blindness was collateral damage. Emily's breath caught, her fingers twitching to smash the screen. She'd spent 8 years rebuilding Daniel's hope, And now she knew it was Harold's betrayal, not fate, that had shattered it. Her eyes burned not with tears, but with a fury that demanded justice. Daniel stood, his movements unsteady but deliberate, his newly restored vision catching glints of Emily's outline. "He thought I'd stay broken," he said, his voice a low thunder. "He thought he could bury this." Emily stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm, a silent anchor. "He can't bury it now," she said, her voice steel. "We have the audio, the contract, the money trail. He's done." Her words were a vow, her heart pounding with the weight of what they'd uncovered. Harold's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a crime that had rippled through Whitaker Innovations, endangering lives for profit. Victoria's absence in this moment loomed large. Emily's mind flashed to their hospital confrontation, to Victoria's promise to investigate the explosion. Had she known about Harold's role? Was she complicit or just another pawn? Emily's fingers tightened around the USB drive, now back in her pocket, its weight a burning reminder of the fight ahead. "We need to tell Victoria," she said, her voice firm but edged with doubt. "She's part of this, whether she admits it or not." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes glinting with a mix of pain and determination. "We'll confront them all. Harold, the board, anyone who let this happen." His hand found hers, his grip fierce, grounding them both. Emily's pulse steadied, her resolve a steel rod in her spine. They'd uncovered a truth that could shatter the company, but it could also free Daniel from the shadows of betrayal. As Sarah copied the files to a secure drive, Emily's eyes locked onto Daniel's, seeing the man she'd fought for, the man who was fighting back. The office door stood closed, but beyond it, Harold's shadow waited, his threats a noose tightening. Emily's hand squeezed Daniel's, her heart a furnace of defiance. The truth was out, but the battle was just beginning. As they prepared to face the board, the USB drive burned in her pocket, a weapon forged in secrets, ready to bring down those who dared to break them. "You're a fool if you think you can ruin me." Harold Grayson's voice was a venomous snarl, his wiry frame blocking the door to his office in Whitaker Innovations' legal wing. Emily Harper stood defiant, her hand clutching the USB drive, its damning audio of Harold's confession burning in her pocket like a live coal. Her pulse thundered, her jaw locked so tight her teeth ached. She'd come to confront him with the truth, that he'd sabotaged the lab, blinded Daniel Whitaker for profit. But Harold's eyes gleamed with a predator's menace, his thin lips twisting into a sneer that promised violence. "You heard the audio," Emily said, her voice a blade, sharp and unyielding. "You ignored the safety warnings, took Nexus Tech's money, and let that explosion happen. Daniel's blindness is on you." Her words were a whip, lashing out as she stepped forward, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Harold's hand shot out, slamming the door shut behind him, the lock clicking with a finality that sent a chill down her spine. "You're out of your league, nurse," he hissed, his face inches from hers, his breath hot with stale coffee and desperation. "That USB won't see the light of day." Emily's heart pounded, her fingers tightening around the drive. "It's over, Harold. We have the contract, the money trail. You're done." Her defiance was a fire, burning through the fear clawing at her chest. Harold's smirk vanished, his hand grabbing her wrist, twisting hard enough to make her gasp. "Give it to me," he growled, his grip a vice, his nails digging into her skin. Emily yanked back, her free hand shoving at his chest. But he was stronger, pushing her against the desk, papers scattering like leaves in a storm. "You think you're a hero?" he spat, his voice a low snarl. "You're nothing. A nobody from Pittsburgh who got too close to a billionaire?" Her knees hit the desk's edge, pain shooting through her legs. But Emily's eyes blazed, her fury a furnace. "I'm the nobody who's going to bury you," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her wrist. She twisted, trying to break free, but Harold shoved her harder, pinning her against the desk, his hand fumbling for the USB in her pocket. Her heart raced, her mind flashing to Daniel, his faint vision returning, his trust in her unwavering. She couldn't let Harold win, not after 8 years of fighting for Daniel's hope. "Stop!" Victoria Whitaker's voice cracked through the room like a gunshot, her heels storming in as she pushed the door open. Unlocked in Harold's haste, her face was pale, her fists clenched, the encrypted file's hint of sabotage still haunting her. "Let her go, Harold," she barked, her voice trembling with rage and betrayal. Harold froze, his grip loosening, but his eyes darted between the women, calculating. "Victoria, this doesn't concern you," he snapped, his voice oily, desperate. "She's trying to ruin us all with lies." Emily seized the moment, wrenching her wrist free, her hand diving into her pocket to protect the USB. "Lies," she said, her voice ablade. "Your voice is on that audio, admitting you sold Daniel out." Victoria's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth as the truth hit her. "You knew about the explosion?" she whispered, her voice breaking, her trust in Harold shattering like glass. Harold's face twisted, his composure cracking. "You don't understand the stakes," he shouted, lunging toward Emily again, his hand aiming for the USB. She dodged, stumbling toward the window, her back against the glass, her heart pounding like a war drum. The drop to the Silicon Valley streets loomed below, a dizzying reminder of the danger she'd walked into. "Enough!" Daniel's voice roared from the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. His eyes, now seeing faint shapes, locked onto Harold with a fury that made the room still. He'd sensed Emily's absence, followed her trail, his improving vision guiding him like a beacon. "Step away from her, Harold," he said, his voice low, lethal, his hands clenched into fists. Harold froze, his sneer faltering as Daniel advanced, his steps unsteady but resolute, his presence a storm breaking over the room. Emily's breath caught, her hand tightening around the USB, her heart swelling with relief and fear. Harold's eyes darted to the door, then back to Emily, his desperation a cornered animal's. "You can't prove anything," he hissed, but his voice wavered, his hands shaking. Emily stood taller, her sneakers planted firm, her voice cutting through his panic. "We already have. The audio, the contract, the money. You're finished." Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing Emily's arm, grounding her, his gaze burning into Harold. "You took my sight," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "You won't take her." The room pulsed with tension, the USB drive in Emily's hand a ticking bomb. Harold's shadow loomed, but Daniel's presence was a shield, his restored vision a weapon. Emily's heart thundered, her resolve unbreakable. They'd exposed Harold's betrayal, but the fight wasn't over. As Daniel's hand tightened around hers, the danger hung heavy, a storm ready to break, and Emily knew the next move would either save them or destroy everything. "You can't hide forever, Harold." Emily Harper's voice was a steel blade, cutting through the tense air of Daniel Whitaker's office as she clutched the USB drive, its weight a burning vow of justice. Her wrist still throbbed from Harold Grayson's grip, the memory of his attack fueling her fury. Daniel stood beside her, his newly restored vision sharpening, his eyes catching her outline with a clarity that made her heart race. Harold had fled the confrontation, his threats lingering like a noose, but Emily's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she refused to let fear win. They needed the final piece of evidence to bury him, and she'd tear Whitaker Innovations apart to find it. "We're close," Daniel said, his voice low, a growl of determination as he gripped her hand, his fingers steadying her trembling ones. "He's desperate. That means he's slipping." His eyes, once clouded by blindness, now glinted with a fire that matched her own. Emily nodded, her sneakers scuffing the floor as she turned to Sarah Kim, who was already hunched over her laptop, her fingers a blur. "The server logs are incomplete," Sarah said, her voice tight with urgency. "But there's a backup in the old lab. If Harold wiped anything, it'll be there." Emily's pulse surged, her hand slamming the desk. "Then we go. Now." They moved fast, slipping through Whitaker Innovations' dimly lit corridors, the Silicon Valley night pressing against the glass walls. Emily's heart pounded, her mind racing with the audio file's damning confession. Harold's voice admitting he'd ignored safety warnings for a Nexus Tech payoff. But they needed more, something ironclad to seal his fate. Daniel led the way, his steps steadier than ever, his vision catching shapes and shadows, a miracle born of their secret stem cell trials. Emily's chest tightened, not with fear but with a fierce pride. She'd fought for his hope, and now they'd fight for truth together. The old lab, tucked in the building's basement, was a maze of dusty equipment and forgotten files, a ghost of the explosion that had blinded Daniel. Sarah hacked into the backup server, her hands shaking as she bypassed security protocols. "This is it," she whispered, her screen glowing with a log file dated the day of the explosion. Emily leaned in, her breath catching as the data loaded. A detailed transaction record showing Harold's final payment to Nexus Tech, time-stamped hours after the blast. $500,000, Sarah read, her voice trembling. He was paid to keep quiet after the explosion. This ties him to the cover-up. Emily's fist balled, her nails biting into her palms. "That's the nail in his coffin," she said, her voice a vow. But Sarah's fingers froze, her eyes widening. "There's more. A maintenance log. The reactor's wiring was flagged as critical 3 days before the explosion. Harold signed off on bypassing the repair." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs, her fury a wildfire. Harold hadn't just ignored warnings. He'd actively sabotaged the lab, ensuring the explosion to secure his deal. Daniel's hand gripped her shoulder, his voice a low thunder. "He stole my site for money. He's done." Sarah copied the files to a secure drive, her hands moving with desperate speed. "We've got everything," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "The audio, the contract, this log. He can't deny it." Emily's eyes locked onto Daniel's, his face now clear in her vision, no longer a blur. "We take this to the board," she said, her voice steel. "Tomorrow. We end this." Daniel nodded, his grip tightening, his eyes burning with a resolve that mirrored hers. "Together," he said, his voice a promise, his hand brushing hers, grounding them both. But a noise, a sharp clatter from the lab's entrance, made Emily's heart lurch. She spun, her sneakers squeaking, her hand diving into her pocket to protect the USB. "Someone's here," Sarah whispered, her fingers fumbling to eject the drive. Emily's pulse roared, her mind flashing to Harold's threats, his oily smirk. Had he followed them? The door creaked, and Victoria Whitaker stepped in, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder. "I found something," she said, her voice low, urgent. "Server logs from the main office. They match your USB. Harold's been deleting evidence." Emily's eyes narrowed, her trust in Victoria fragile after the boardroom betrayal. "Why are you here?" she snapped, her voice a blade. Victoria's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the folder. "I was wrong about you, and about Harold. He's been lying to me for years." She handed Emily the folder, her hands shaking. Inside were printed emails, Harold instructing an assistant to shred documents post-explosion. Emily's heart leapt, her fingers tracing the words, each one a bullet for their case. "You're with us?" Daniel asked, his voice sharp, his eyes searching Victoria's. She nodded, her face etched with guilt. "I trusted him. I was blind too." Emily's chest tightened, her anger warring with a flicker of empathy. Victoria's betrayal had hurt, but her remorse was real, and these emails were gold. "We've got enough," Emily said, her voice firm, her hand closing around the USB and folder. "Harold's going down." Sarah ejected the drive, slipping it into Emily's hand, its weight a final weapon. "We need to move," she said, her voice tense. "If Harold knows we're here, he'll try to stop us." Emily's sneakers hit the floor, her stride purposeful as they headed for the exit. Daniel's hand brushed hers, his presence a shield, his vision a beacon. The lab's shadows loomed, but Emily's resolve was brighter, her heart a furnace of justice. They had the evidence, audio, contracts, logs, emails, everything to bury Harold. But as they stepped into the corridor, a faint sound echoed behind them, like footsteps trailing in the dark. Emily's hand tightened around the drive, her pulse a war drum. The truth was theirs, but the danger was closer than ever, a predator stalking their every move. "You're a traitor, Harold," Daniel Whitaker's voice thundered through the Whitaker Innovations boardroom, his eyes now sharp with restored vision, locked onto Harold Grayson like a hunter sighting prey. The USB drive clutched in Emily Harper's hand burned with the weight of truth. Audio, contracts, server logs, and emails proving Harold's sabotage of the lab explosion that had blinded Daniel. Emily stood beside him, her sneakers planted firm, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. The board members, 12 faces frozen in shock, stared as Daniel, once confined to darkness, strode to the head of the mahogany table. His presence a storm breaking over the room. "You can't prove a thing," Harold snapped, his wiry frame leaping from his chair, his voice a desperate hiss. His thin lips twisted, his hands slamming the table, scattering papers. "This is a witch hunt, Daniel. You're delusional." But his eyes darted to Emily, to the USB drive, betraying his panic. Emily's pulse roared, her fingers tightening around the drive, her fury a wildfire. 8 years she'd cared for Daniel, fought for his hope, and now Harold's betrayal was laid bare. A $2 million deal with Nexus Tech to ignore safety warnings, causing the explosion that stole Daniel's sight. "Play it," Daniel said, his voice low, lethal, his hand brushing Emily's for strength. Sarah Kim, at the boardroom's laptop, clicked the audio file. Harold's voice crackled through the speakers, smug and damning. "The reactor was a risk, but Nexus paid well. No one will trace it." Gasps erupted, Margaret Blackwell's hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Harold's face drained of color, his hands trembling as he gripped the table's edge. "That's fabricated," he shouted, his voice cracking. But Emily stepped forward, her voice ablade. "Fabricated? We have the contract, the money trail, and the server logs. You sold Daniel out for cash." Victoria Whitaker, standing near the boardroom's edge, clutched the folder of emails she'd found. Harold's orders to shred evidence post-explosion. Her face was ashen, her hands shaking as she spoke, her voice a broken whisper. "You lied to me, Harold, for years." She slammed the folder onto the table, her guilt and rage colliding. "You let my brother suffer to line your pockets." Harold's eyes darted between them, his smirk gone, replaced by a cornered animal snarl. "You don't understand the stakes," he spat, his finger jabbing at Daniel. "You were weak, blind, useless." Daniel's fist clenched, his knuckles whitening, but his voice was ice. "Weak? I built this company while you schemed in the shadows." He turned to the board, his gaze commanding, his restored vision a weapon. "This man caused the explosion that blinded me. He took my sight, endangered lives, all for a payoff, and he thought he could bury it." He nodded to Sarah, who projected the server logs and contract, the $500,000 post-explosion payment glowing on the screen. The board members shifted, their faces a mix of shock and disgust, their silence a death knell for Harold's defense. Emily's heart pounded, her hand brushing Daniel's, grounding them both. "He threatened me," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the room. "Tried to silence me to protect his lies, but we're done hiding." Her words were a vow, her eyes locking onto Harold's, unyielding. The boardroom pulsed with tension, the truth a guillotine poised to fall. Margaret Blackwell stood, her voice trembling but firm. "We need a vote. Harold's removal, effective immediately." Hands shot up, 9-3, Harold's allies shrinking under the weight of evidence. Harold lunged for the laptop, his hands scrambling to shut it down. But Daniel grabbed his arm, his grip iron. "You're finished," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "Security's waiting." The door burst open, guards storming in, their hands on Harold's shoulders as he thrashed, his shouts echoing. "You'll regret this, Daniel." But his threats were hollow, his power shattered. Emily's chest heaved, her hand still clutching the USB, its secrets now a weapon that had brought him down. As Harold was dragged out, Daniel turned to Emily, his eyes clear, his hand finding hers. "I love you," he said, his voice soft but fierce, loud enough for the board to hear. "You gave me my sight back, my life back." Emily's heart swelled, her fingers squeezing his, her resolve a steel rod. The boardroom was silent, the weight of their bond undeniable. Victoria stepped forward, her face etched with remorse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes on Emily. "For everything." The room felt electric, the truth a cleansing fire. Emily's sneakers stood firm, her heart a furnace of triumph and love. Harold was gone, but the board's eyes lingered, their judgment a storm yet to come. As Daniel's hand tightened around hers, Emily knew the fight wasn't over. The world would question their love, their victory. But she was ready. The USB drive, now empty of its secrets, was a symbol of their triumph, and the battle ahead would be fought together. You're finished, Harold. Daniel Whitaker's voice was a hammer, slamming through the Silicon Valley police station as Harold Grayson was led away in handcuffs, his wiry frame slumping under the weight of his crimes. Emily Harper stood beside Daniel, her sneakers rooted to the floor, her hand gripping his with a fierceness that matched the fire in her chest. Her jaw clenched, teeth grinding as she watched Harold's smirk dissolve, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. The USB drive's evidence, audio contracts, server logs, had buried him, proving he'd sabotaged the lab explosion that blinded Daniel for a $2 million Nexus Tech payoff. Justice was a blade, and it had finally struck. "You can't do this!" Harold shouted, his voice cracking as officers pulled him toward a holding cell. "I'm a Whitaker lawyer. I'm untouchable." But his words were hollow, drowned by the clang of metal doors. Emily's pulse steadied, her fingers tightening around Daniel's, her heart swelling with triumph. 8 years she'd fought for him, through darkness and doubt, and now Harold's betrayal was exposed, a crime that had stolen Daniel's sight and nearly broken them both. Her eyes locked onto Harold's retreating figure, her resolve a steel rod. He'd threatened her, tried to silence her, but she'd won. Victoria Whitaker stood nearby, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. "I trusted him," she whispered, her voice raw with guilt, her earlier arrogance shattered by the boardroom reveal. She'd resigned as CFO hours ago, her letter a confession of her complicity in trusting Harold's lies. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, her eyes meeting his, now clear with restored vision. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand squeezing Emily's. "You chose ambition over family," he said, his voice low, cutting. "But you can still make it right." Victoria nodded, her fingers twisting her purse strap, her remorse a heavy shadow. The board had acted swiftly, implementing new safety protocols to prevent another disaster, and their trust in Daniel's leadership was restored. Harold faced charges of corporate fraud and endangerment, his empire of deceit crumbling. Emily's chest heaved, her breath steadying as she felt the weight of justice settle. She'd faced Victoria's scorn, Harold's threats, and now stood victorious, her hand in Daniel's, their bond unbreakable. "It's over," she said, her voice firm, a vow to herself as much as to him. Daniel's eyes, seeing her clearly for the first time in years, softened. "Because of you," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. As Harold's shouts faded down the hall, Emily's heart pounded with a new rhythm, relief, pride, and a flicker of hope. The battle was won, but the war wasn't over. The world would judge their love, question her motives, but she was ready. Daniel's hand in hers was a shield, and the truth they'd uncovered was a beacon. Outside, the police station doors loomed, a gateway to a future they'd fight for together. But for now, Emily stood tall, her sneakers steady, her heart a furnace of defiance, ready for whatever came next. "You don't get to rewrite the past with money." Emily Harper's voice sliced through the tense air of Whitaker Innovations' executive suite, her eyes blazing as she faced Daniel Whitaker. Her sneakers were planted firmly, her hand gripping the edge of his desk. The USB drive, now a symbol of their victory over Harold Grayson, tucked safely in her pocket. Daniel's restored vision caught every detail of her defiance, his heart pounding with awe for the woman who'd fought for him through 8 years of darkness. But her words weren't aimed at him. They targeted Victoria Whitaker, who stood clutching a proposal, her face etched with a guilt she couldn't shake. "I'm not rewriting anything," Victoria snapped, her voice sharp but trembling, her fingers crumpling the edges of the document. "I'm trying to fix what I broke." Her resignation as CFO still stung, a wound from the boardroom where Harold's betrayal was exposed, but her eyes burned with a new purpose. "Daniel, Emily, this is my plan. $75 million for a vision research fund, the Whitaker Vision Fund, to help others like you." She slid the proposal across the desk, her hands shaking, her earlier arrogance replaced by a desperate need for redemption. Emily's jaw clenched, her teeth grinding as she snatched the document, her pulse racing. She'd seen Victoria's cruelty, felt the sting of her boardroom humiliation. But this was different. The proposal outlined a foundation to fund stem cell therapies, inspired by Daniel's miraculous recovery. Emily's fingers tightened on the paper, her heart warring between skepticism and hope. "You think this erases what you did?" she said, her voice a blade cutting through Victoria's plea. "You called me a gold digger, tried to fire me. Now you want to play savior?" Victoria's face flushed, her nails biting into her palms. "I was wrong," she said, her voice cracking, raw with shame. "I trusted Harold, believed his lies about the explosion. I hurt you, Daniel, and I hurt Emily. This fund, it's not just money. It's my way of making amends." Her eyes flicked to Daniel, pleading for a chance. Daniel's hand brushed Emily's, grounding her, his voice low but firm. "She's trying, Emily. Let's hear her out." Emily's chest heaved, her anger a wildfire, but his touch steadied her, a reminder of the battles they'd won together. She flipped through the proposal, her eyes scanning the details. $75 million for clinical trials, partnerships with top neurologists, a focus on vision restoration for the underserved. Her mind flashed to Lily, the young girl at Allegheny General whose cataracts clouded her world. This could save her, save countless others. Emily's fingers paused, her heart softening, but her voice stayed sharp. "You're not running it," she said, her eyes locking onto Victoria's. "I am. With Daniel, we've earned it." Her words were a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. Victoria nodded, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Agreed," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "You're the heart of this, Emily. I'll step back." Daniel's eyes lit up, his hand squeezing Emily's, his pride in her a palpable force. "The Whitaker Vision Fund," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "Co-directed by you, Emily. Your compassion, your fight, it's why I can see again." Emily's throat tightened, her fingers trembling as she set the proposal down, her resolve a steel rod. She'd spent years studying Daniel's condition, guiding him through therapy, and now her work could light the way for others. Victoria took a step forward, her hands unclenching. "There's more," she said, her voice steadying. "I'm starting a mentorship program for working-class women in tech. Inspired by you, Emily. I judged you by your background, but you're stronger than I'll ever be." Emily's eyes widened, her anger flickering, replaced by a grudging respect. Victoria's gesture was small compared to the fun, but it was real, a step toward dismantling the prejudice that had nearly broken them. Daniel stood, his movements sure, his vision catching every detail of the room. "We're doing this," he said, his voice a vow, his hand finding Emily's again. "For every person who's lost their light, for every family like yours, Emily." Her heart swelled, her fingers squeezing his, her mind flashing to her mother and sister in Pittsburgh, to the sacrifices that had brought her here. She'd fought for Daniel, for truth, and now she'd fight for others. "Let's make it happen," she said, her voice firm, a promise to the world. As Victoria left, her heels clicking softly, Emily and Daniel stood together, the proposal a blueprint for hope. The fund would change lives, but it was their bond, forged in darkness, tempered by truth, that would drive it. Emily's sneakers stood steady, her heart a furnace of purpose. The fight with Harold was over, but a new mission was beginning, one that would ripple beyond Silicon Valley. As Daniel's hand tightened around hers, the future loomed bright, but not without challenges. The world would watch, judge, but Emily was ready, her resolve a beacon, her love a shield, prepared to face whatever storms came next. "You saw me when I was invisible." Daniel Whitaker's voice was a quiet thunder, his words trembling with emotion as he leaned close to Emily Harper. Their first dance as husband and wife swaying to a soft melody in their Pittsburgh home. The small backyard, strung with fairy lights, hummed with the warmth of family and friends, but Emily's world narrowed to Daniel's eyes. Now clear, seeing her fully after 8 years of darkness. Her grandmother's altered wedding dress clung to her frame, the eye-shaped pendant he'd given her glinting against her chest. Her sneakers, swapped for heels tonight, pressed into the grass, her heart pounding with a joy so fierce it burned. Harold Grayson's betrayal was a fading scar, but this moment, her hand in Daniel's, their love declared, was a triumph that rewrote their story. "You were never invisible," Emily said, her voice a soft blade, cutting through the music, her fingers squeezing his as tears pricked her eyes. Her jaw clenched, not with anger but with a gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her. 8 years she'd guided him through blindness, through despair, through the secret stem cell trials that restored his sight. She'd faced Victoria's scorn, Harold's threats, and now stood here, married to the man who defied every odd. Her heart swelled, her pulse a steady drumbeat of love and pride. "You were always enough," she whispered, her voice breaking, her lips brushing his ear. Daniel's hand tightened around hers, his eyes catching hers with a clarity that still stole her breath. "You taught me that," he said, his voice raw, his steps steady as they moved together. "You saw me, Emily, when I was nothing but a broken man in a mansion. You fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." His words were a vow, each one landing like a spark, igniting her chest. The crowd, her mother Clara, her sister Lily, Victoria, and close friends, faded into a blur, their applause a distant hum. Emily's fingers traced the pendant, its tiny eye a symbol of their journey, her heart a furnace of love that had carried them through. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the backyard of their new Pittsburgh home, a modest house they'd bought to start fresh, away from the Silicon Valley spotlight. Clara stood nearby, her gnarled hands clapping, her eyes shining with pride for her daughter, who'd carried their family through sacrifice. Lily, now a college graduate, beamed, her nursing dreams sparked by Emily's strength. Victoria, her face softened by remorse, lingered at the edge, her presence a quiet olive branch. She'd reconciled with Daniel, her mentorship program for working-class women a testament to her change, inspired by Emily's unyielding spirit. Emily's chest tightened, her breath hitching as she saw the family they'd built. Not just hers and Daniel's, but a community healed by truth. The Whitaker Vision Fund, launched 3 months ago with $75 million, was already changing lives. Emily, co-director alongside Daniel, had overseen its first success, a young boy in Ohio regaining partial sight through their funded trials. Her mind flashed to the hospital, to the nights she'd studied vision therapies, to the moment Daniel first saw her outline, his voice trembling, "I see you, Emily." That memory fueled her, her resolve a steel rod as she pushed the fund forward, ensuring others found the light she'd helped Daniel reclaim. Her fingers brushed Daniel's arm, grounding her, her heart swelling with purpose. Victoria approached as the dance ended, her hands clutching a small gift, a leather-bound journal for Emily to document the fund's progress. "You were right," she said, her voice low, her eyes meeting Emily's without flinching. "I judged you, but you're the strongest person I know. Thank you for showing me what loyalty means." Emily's lips twitched, a half-smile breaking through her guarded heart. "You're learning," she said, her voice sharp but warm, her hand accepting the journal. Victoria nodded, her fingers trembling, her redemption a work in progress but real. Lily joined them, her nursing scrub swapped for a dress, her eyes bright with excitement. "I got into Pitt's nursing program," she said, her voice bubbling, her arms wrapping around Emily. "Because of you. You showed me how to fight for what matters." Emily's throat tightened, her arms pulling Lily close, her heart aching with pride. She'd worked 2 jobs to put Lily through college, just as she'd fought for Daniel's hope. Now her sister's future was secure, a ripple of their victory over Harold's betrayal. Daniel pulled Emily back to the dance floor, his hand finding hers, his eyes catching the pendant's glint. "This is us," he said, his voice soft, his fingers tracing the eye-shaped charm. "You gave me my sight, but more than that, you gave me a reason to see." Emily's chest heaved, her breath catching as she pressed her forehead to his. "You gave me a home," she whispered, her voice a vow, her heart a beacon. Their love wasn't just about his recovery, it was about seeing each other truly through every storm. The crowd cheered as they kissed, their bond a fire that had burned through prejudice, betrayal, and doubt. The Whitaker Vision Fund was making headlines, its trials promising hope to thousands. Medical journals praised Daniel's case, calling it a breakthrough, while human interest stories celebrated their love as proof that resilience could conquer anything. Emily's mother clapped louder, her weathered hands a testament to their family's strength. Victoria's mentorship program was gaining traction, empowering women like Emily to break barriers. And Lily's nursing journey was just beginning, inspired by the sister who'd never given up. As the music faded, Daniel and Emily stood together, their hands intertwined, their eyes locked. The fairy lights flickered, but their glow was nothing compared to the fire in their hearts. "What do you see now?" Emily asked, her voice soft, her lips curving into a smile. Daniel's hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "Always you." Her heart swelled, her fingers squeezing his, her resolve a steel rod. They'd faced Harold's sabotage, Victoria's scorn, the world's judgment, and emerged stronger, their love a shield, their purpose a beacon. The night stretched on, but Emily's mind was already on tomorrow. The fund's next trial, Lily's first nursing class, the endless demands of a life built on hope. She'd carried Daniel through darkness, fought for truth, and now stood ready to face the future. As they stepped off the dance floor, hand in hand, the pendant gleamed against her chest, a symbol of their shared vision. The world would watch, question, but Emily was ready, her heart a furnace of love and determination. Their story wasn't just a happy ending. It was a beginning, a legacy of hope that would outlast them both, a light for anyone lost in the dark. This story of Emily and Daniel shows that true vision comes from love, trust, and seeing someone's worth beyond their circumstances. It's about resilience, defying prejudice, and finding light in the darkest moments. What's a time when someone's belief in you changed your life? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.